business.
We're good to go, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the March 27th, 2025 Marine Fish Advisory Commission meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. And as you can see, the agenda is lengthy, so let's have a good meeting today. No temper tantrums. And that's all I've got. So I'm going to move on to the review of the March 2025 business meeting agenda.
Mr. Chair, we'll do a roll call attendance first.
By all means.
Okay. Bill Amaru.
Here.
Bill Doyle.
Present.
Chris McGuire.
Here.
Khalil Bogdan. Raymond Kane.
Here.
Shelley Edmondson.
Here.
Suki Sawyer.
Yeah. Hello.
Tim Brady.
Tim Brady here.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Mr. Chair, turning it back over to you.
Yeah, somebody's in the background there. I don't know if that's somebody on the phone but I'm getting
I'll
noise.
mute everyone but you.
Thank you. Okay, review of the March 2025 business meeting agenda. Any changes requested by commission members?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair. We can proceed to review and approval of minutes.
Okay, so the March meeting agenda is approved. We'll move on to the review and approval of January 2025 draft business meeting minutes. Any edits?
Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized. Who's that, Bill?
Thank you. It's Bill. Yes. Yes, I would move that we approve the minutes with the change in the introduction section where it states that I was not present. I did come in a little late, which is noted later in the minutes, but I was present. And other than that, I would move to accept.
Jared?
That's a technical correction. Bill was present. I remember talking to him at that meeting. We can make that edit to the final minutes.
Thank you. So we need a vote on this, Jared?
We need a second to Bill's motion to accept as amended, and then a roll call vote.
Thank you. Who'd like to second Bill's?
I'll second that.
Who's that, Bill Doyle?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, I'll call the roll. Bill Amaru.
Yes.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Chris
Yes.
McGuire.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson.
Yes.
Suki Sawyer.
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Who is that in the background?
I don't know. I muted everyone again. The
Somebody-
motion for the approve the January 2012 25 minutes as amended by Bill Amaru was approved.
Thank you, members. We'll move this agenda along. Agency updates. Law enforcement. Who's representing law enforcement today?
Morning, Mr. Chairman. It's Matt Bass.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Good morning. Great, thanks. So to be brief, following the agenda, it looks like update on our personnel. We're currently in the process of hiring 3 imminently. Although there are a number of retirements pending, so we'll probably break even there. Although Colonel Mason has requested an additional 12 to be hired this fall. We'll see where that how that plays out. With the recent ops, been working well with the DMF and their contract boats removing gear. It's been a pretty smooth season as far as that. That's pretty much winding down. Although I think it was the combination of the NOAA flights and coastal studies flights. There's 45 whales the other day in the bay still, as well as some in Mass Bay. So I think we'll probably be transitioning once that speed limit comes into effect, affecting everybody. As far as incidents, so we've been continuing to kind of monitor those lobster offloads in P-towns by the offshore draggers. There was one boat that was inspected that came up over the limit, oversized, a number of other violations that did result in a fairly substantial seizure of about $11,000, and citations were just about 7,000. But that's fairly recent and just started moving its way through the courts. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Lieutenant Bass. Questions for Lieutenant Bass from members?
Not seeing any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lieutenant Bass. Moving along, Department of Fish and Game. Tom, are you on board today? Tom O'Shea?
Yes, I am, Raymond Kane.
Good morning, Tom. How are you?
And
Miss
yourself,
Tom O'Shea.
Chairman Kane. Glad to be here, and also just want to thank Matt Bath and the MEP for their assistance through the transition and the wedge closure and everything they're doing out there. So appreciate the Colonel and the team support. For us at the department, we've been working on the environmental bond bill that we hope will be eventually announced this spring by the governor. But in that, we have been working to include provisions for marine habitat restoration and improved access for shore-based fishing. And there are strong indications that even in our capital investment plan for the next 2 years, we may see some increases in our marine habitat restoration and access, including, some of the work we've been doing at DMF really has been leading the way with eelgrass restoration, oyster reef, living shoreline type of work and aquaculture. And they've been working with TNC on that. And so I think that's getting noticed and recognized as a need, and the leadership at DMF on this. So I'm hopeful we're gonna see some increases there. That's separate from the environmental bond bill, but just in terms of what capital projects get funded, for the department, and that is separate from the environmental bond bill, which will eventually get out there, and that has to go through the legislature. But again, hoping to include some increased provisions for DMF in that as well. And so anyway, that's some good progress there. More to come, and I'll update the commission when I know more about that. So also just want to highlight that I went to the Seafood Expo with Director McKiernan and DMF team, and it was pretty good. I saw some and heard about some new innovations going on, like auctions at the Gloucester and New Bedford piers, and various innovations in some of the use of seafood, trying to get better prices, also utilizing green crab. It was just, anyway, it was some interesting things going on that I thought was helpful to hear about. And we also met, the secretary and I met with the Norwegian delegation, their Minister of Fisheries and Ocean. So that was interesting to hear about what's going on in Norway. A lot of the same challenges we have here, both in terms of offshore wind energy development, ground fish stocks and issues there. So they certainly are experiencing, in some cases, more challenges than even we are at the moment. But so anyway, that was interesting. Also want to talk about Commercial Fisheries Commission. Dan and Allison Brizius at CZM, they're going to be co-chairs, and we're getting closer to launching that meeting. And I think Director McKiernan can talk more about that. But that was something that was expected from the legislature, that we would stand this commission up to really provide that forum for the issues related to commercial fisheries. And I think Dan can talk more again about how that group differs from what we do here and how we're setting up the agenda. The members were polled in terms of what they were looking to talk about, and use this commission to voice their concerns and come up with solutions affecting commercial fishing in the state. So that's more to come on that. But I do think it's actually a really good forum for, that isn't just focused on offshore wind, but focused on other issues that affect the sector. So so more on that. And also want to mention that we have the biodiversity reports almost finished. I presented to the climate cabinet. And as you all know, that has a marine component to it, and secretary is about to send it up to the governor's office. So I know that there were questions last time where that's at, and just given the the situation in the state budget and everything, I'm still hopeful, even though it's a tough time, to get some additional investment in our work. So that's the challenge, but I'm still optimistic. And then lastly, want to elevate the issue around the federal government and the freeze on regulations and the concerns that uncertainty that brings to the fishing industry here in Massachusetts, and the ability for us to sustain our fisheries. This is challenging, and I think we need to raise that issue more publicly. So it'd be just so you know, that's something that I'm hoping to do, but I'm working with Director McCannon on that, because I think we need to raise the issue. You've probably even seen some articles about it already. And as far as like cuts to federal funding at this point, we don't really have any cuts at this point. There is some frozen federal funding on our Division of Ecological Restoration projects, including fish passages. And that's mostly U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grants. But so far, we haven't had any cuts to federal funding, but we're watching it, we're tracking it each week. And so, again, we'll let you know if anything changes there. So that's what I've got, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Shea. Questions for Commissioner O'Shea?
Not
Jared?
seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
I have one question, Tom. Many years ago, both SMAS and the Center for Coastal Study did eelgrass plantings, but in layman's slang, they wouldn't swap spit. They wouldn't share information. Do you think at a future commission meeting, we could get a presentation on eelgrass from somebody, whoever's doing this project for the state? Because I know representative from SMAS, when I had her out on the boat, told me that they are having a difficult time with eelgrass in Nantucket Sound, and you said it's coming right along. So I was wondering if we could get a presentation on that, because eelgrass is critical. I know we've lost it in a lot of our estuaries and bays on Cape Cod. Is there any possibility of that, Commissioner?
Well, I certainly would support it. I see Bob Glenn's got his hand up. He can say a lot more, but this is an area that's a priority to us in our strategic plan. And I'm going to put all the energy I can into supporting our marine habitat restoration. So just know that, Ray. And if I can do anything to help bring partners or others together on this, I would. But I see Bob might want to say more about it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Bob Glenn, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add in, Ray, that, we'd be happy to provide a presentation to the commission about our eelgrass restoration work. On our staff, we have Dr. Forrest Schneck, who is kind of pioneering some new eelgrass restoration work and methodologies that is showing a lot of promise. Historically, the work that's been done in the region, including the work DMF has done, has been based mostly on transplanting shoots. And what Forrest has learned is that he can actually develop eelgrass seeds, and those seeding an area with seeds as opposed to shoots, so far, at least preliminarily, looks like has a much higher success rate. And so we're using right now our Catco Marine Lab to do some experimentation along that arena. And I'm sure we'd be happy to come and give an update on that work, as well as future plans that we have for expanding that work, as the commissioner indicated.
Thank you very much, Bob. If there's no questions for Commissioner O'Shea, I'm going to move this meeting along. Director Dan McKinnon, you're up. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I would just like to follow down Tom's path on a couple of issues. One is the interactions with the federal government. It's something that we've been frustrated by. Many of the agencies just haven't been very communicative in terms of their current involvement, their future involvement with collaborations. For example, the Food and Drug Administration, which works very closely with our shellfish program. They can't travel, they won't be going to regional meetings. And so it's been very challenging. So we're kind of fearing the worst and hoping for the best in terms of the future of those agencies and how we interact with them. But as Tom mentioned, we just don't know. We all watch the news and there's talks about cuts within agencies, but there's nothing really has materialized in terms of what we would be able to take home relative to reductions in force, or for that matter, reductions in programs. So, but it is something that we are dealing with every day. Commercial Fisheries Commission, interesting story, enacted in a state budget 3 years ago. It's a collection of organizations that have been designated by the legislature to come together and talk about the sustainability of commercial fisheries, not just biologically, but economically. Obviously, that's a very close issue to what we do here. And in our inaugural meeting, I will do everything I can to sort of create some clear lines that, that which is the domain of this commission will remain that way. But I do see the value after, pondering it for the last year of talking about some more overarching issues, such as working waterfront issues or the need for loans, things that the legislature might be able to assist with. Because I think there's a general desire on the part of the legislature to support the commercial fisheries, but I don't think they always have the best, recipes for how to do that. And so I'm hopeful that this large group is about 17 individuals appointed from various groups, we'll be able to kind of come to some consensus positions. And our mandate is to meet 4 times a year and also to produce an annual report that's going to be submitted to the legislature. So it would be something to keep abreast of. It's co-chaired by CZM and DMF. And I think it'll give us an opportunity to work closer with CZM on things that they work on, such as ocean management and things like, shore access or waterfront access. So, we'll see what we can do with that. So it's a new challenge for us, and we're looking forward to that. And that first meeting is Tuesday, the 8th, and that's going to be an in-person meeting in Boston. On the chair front, Bradley Morgan is on the call today. She's helping Jared to manage this meeting. She's the new Julia Kaplan, and we're really pleased to have her on board. And then we've also hired a shellfish restoration specialist who's working on shellfish restoration throughout the state. His name is Sean Terrell, based in Gloucester. And then finally, our dive safety officer, many of you may have known Vin Melkowski, who retired right after Christmas, and his replacement is Ashley Buke, also known as Peach. She comes from California, and she looks like she's going to be a great fit for DMF. On another front, we are releasing new videos that feature DMF recreational staff fishing and prescribing ways to maximize survival of released striped bass. Ben Gahagan is featured on those. We're also releasing some flounder promotion videos. This is part of the seafood marketing program. It's always bothered me or kind of confused me why pound for pound flounders are undervalued, typically around 2/3 of the price of cod or haddock. And it's my personal view that I think people have forgotten how to cook them. And so this is a handful of videos shot by Wendy Maynardi and our contractor that feature some really great recipes. And I've already made 2 of them, and I can attest they're very good. We went to the seafood show, as Tom mentioned. We had a great meeting with some of the other states, and there was conversations about kind of regionalizing fishing promotion of fisheries products, especially for species that are managed by like regional entities, whether it be, bluefin tuna or like monkfish or groundfish. It doesn't make much sense to try to claim that a Massachusetts monkfish is any better than a Rhode Island monkfish. So we see the value of combining forces and where we can. Obviously, in the case of oysters, oysters are are labeled to the embayment, and everybody takes pride in that. So we won't be, getting, involved at that level. But for those species that are clearly, regionally managed, I think we should be regionally promoting them. And so that's something we're working on. And my last bullet is, last night I penned a letter to the town of Wareham. There's one area in Massachusetts relative to our horseshoe crab spawning surveys that seems to not be showing the same trends of either being stable or growing, and that's Upper Buzzards Bay. And what we discovered is that the town of Wareham has a beach grooming program every spring. And so we're suspicious that that might actually reduce survival of horseshoe crab eggs if done, in places and times where that the egg nests could be, destroyed, or the eggs or larvae damaged. So we've asked them to consider moving any of those beach grooming activities to either before, April 30th or after July 1st, when there'd be less of a potential impact on horseshoe crabs. And then overall, I want to thank in advance all the commission members for the work that you've had to put in to read all these documents and to stay engaged with us. I recognize that your services are done on a volunteer basis, and it is a ton of work. And I really do appreciate your engagement on this. We're going to try our best to not have such a huge load in one meeting like this in the future. The time constraints that we were under are partly caused by the Secretary of State's sort of policies and relative to the filing of regulations, and also the folks above us in the legal department. When I say above us, all the way up to EEA, because they review these in advance. And so on one hand, it's much easier for us to give them, one set of regs, even if the set is enormous, as opposed to, sending them in batch. But we also recognize that this batch was so large that it did, I think, put the crimp on a lot of people's time, especially since the public comment period ended on 2 Sundays ago. And then we worked to get all the documents out by Friday of last week, which meant we had to digest everything in a matter of just about 4 days. So anyway, we'll do our best to try to give you smaller chunks to chew on. But I just want to thank you in advance for indulging us in this round of rulemaking. But having said that, I really am proud of the staff's output on all these issues that we're putting forth to you today. I think we've got it exactly right on so many of the issues, and I look forward to discussing those issues with you this morning.
Are you good, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Questions for the director?
Yes,
Bill Emmer?
thank you.
Recognize, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In an effort to try and be brief, I actually said I was not going to make any comments until we got into action items, but I heard Dan say something that's near and dear to my heart just a few minutes ago about flounder and the price of flounder, specifically for me, yellowtail, and for my family. I want to tell you a story about my son's groundfish trip that he took this fall. They happened to land on a really nice set of yellowtail, nice large fish, came in with more than he's caught in a long time. My grandson his crew was overjoyed. He thought they were going to have a great trip. Came in, unloaded the fish, got a settlement check a week later. The price was 70 cents a pound for large yellowtail flounder that he landed. It's very important that the public in general and the commissioner, I hope, is listening to this, knows that these fish are not only undervalued, underappreciated, and there needs to be some direction from people other than the fishing industry who keep talking about how low these prices are, so that we can get these fish back up to where they belong. I think the general public would be willing to pay for what they're worth. I know they're paying a lot for other things that they seem to have the money for, and our flounder stocks are increasing. The conservation efforts made by the fleets are working in most of these stocks. The state of Massachusetts and the yellowtail allocations this year has increased the limit for a trip, and all indications are positive, except you can't make any money on fish you don't get paid for. 70 cents a pound was what I was getting when I was dragging in 1999. I checked my records. 70 to 90 cents, which was okay back when fuel was half of what it is now, and all the other expenses were a third of what they are now. So thank you very much, Dan, for bringing that up. And I hope that we can do more than just mention it for a minute and a half in a meeting like this, and we can do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Director McKiernan, would you direct Bill to Wendy Minardi to have a conversation offline?
Yeah, and Story Reed is on, and Story, you can get involved with this as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill.
All right, Bill, so please get in touch with Story Reed offline.
Zuki?
Sue,
Yeah, thanks.
nice.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks, Ray. Dan, came to my attention that the Steamship Authority is maybe going to advertise about, put the advertisements up about, lobstermen in Massachusetts killing whales. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, that's a slight misinterpretation of what I reported to Beth Cassoni, your executive director. What I reported to her was last year, after we saw those very, I guess, misinformed posters featuring a right whale, a whale and a lobster, implicating that lobsters are killing. The pursuit of lobsters is resulting in whale deaths. There was a lot of outcry to the steamship authorities, and these were paid ads, and they're not cheap. I think that one poster, which is probably in the range of like 16 by 20 or something, was hung on a steamship, in a prominent location in the steamship ferry, and I think cost the group who posted it something in the realm of $5,000 to $10,000. It's season long advertisement. And so, we raised concerns with the Steamship Authority. We wound up spending some of our own seafood marketing to put some competing messaging up on that same ship. And then there was enough public outcry that the board that oversees the steamship decided to suspend all of the advertisements on the vessel. But after about 6 months, they've reversed that decision to suspend all the advertising, and they haven't changed their policies. But that doesn't mean that this ad is going to reappear. It just means that they've reinstated the ability and their ability to sell ads and under the same guidelines as before. So, I asked the question, well, is there ways to sort of populate or to encourage maybe local island interest or, other folks who aren't as political as that, to fill those slots? And I didn't get much of an answer. So it doesn't mean that particular poster is coming back. It just means that the policy to not accept any ad or any post any ads was reversed.
Yeah. Okay, Dan. Further then, I noticed that the governor wrote a letter of support for the Steamship Authority to go against the speed limit restrictions that were going to be put down in there in federal waters. It's for right whales. I think the governor could make the same kind of call for the lobster industry in Massachusetts with you and the commissioner speaking to her.
Oh, well, sure, but there's nothing to respond to at this time because those ads don't exist at this time. I mean, they're an authority. They're a little bit independent. So, what was described to us is it's kind of a free speech thing that, it's not this, they're selling ads, much like if you jumped on a municipal bus, you might see ads, posted on the wall of the bus, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of different entities that buy ad space. So at this point, there's nothing to object to or to write about.
Okay, well, it's it's tough to wait till after the fact when they post an ad. Wonder if DMF could post an ad also, like they proposed last year. That's all. I just hate to
Mhm.
see it come out and then everybody trying to scramble to deal with it. But again, with the governor writing a letter of support and the steamship authority about speed limits on right whales, then why she couldn't possibly write a letter to the authority about the commission's feeling on the lobster industry. That's all.
Sure.
We good, Suki?
Yeah, till the ad comes out. Thanks, Rick.
All right, thank you for bringing that up, Suki. Any other questions for the director?
Yeah, we got a couple hands raised. Commissioner O'Shea?
Thank you,
Commissioner
Jerry.
O'Shea recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, well, first, I guess I'll just, quickly respond to Suki that Ann and I will certainly keep an eye out for that and we'll respond accordingly. As far as Bill Amaru's question on the price or the point about the prices, and this is an area where I was just curious that we're talking about buyers and sellers exchange. It's an electronic seafood auctioning company operating in New Bedford and now at the State Fishing Pier in Gloucester. They're saying this is promising to much more competitive prices for fish at the pier, but I'm just, throwing that out there, that they were sort of saying this is going to see much more reliable and competitive pricing. But, I don't have any data to say whether or not that's the case or not, but just throwing that out there. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Shea. Jared, you have hands?
Yes, Chris McGuire, you're next.
Chris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just super briefly, I wanted to thank, I think, Jared and the DMF team for making the step to recording and broadcasting the public hearings on Zoom. I was out of town when those hearings took place, and I really appreciated the opportunity to listen to those a little bit and get a sense of the public's comments, just because I wasn't able to attend. So I hope that that was a success and that we'll continue doing that in the future.
So just to editorialize a bit on that for some clarification, we're piloting some new technology that we purchased, microphone technology that may allow us to accommodate listen-in sessions for future public hearings and future public meetings, both of the commission and all of our public bodies. So we trial ran that technology by broadcasting the recent public hearings on Zoom for our commission members, just to make sure it worked adequately enough. And the feedback I've received so far is that it has. So I am hopeful that we will be able to expand our use of that to accommodate virtual listening in to in-person meetings, not a hybridization of the meetings, but a listen-in option. So hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, just that was really helpful for me, just because I was out of town. So appreciate that pushing forward. I know that all that technology is sort of a pain in the butt, so thanks for working out the kinks.
Thank you, Chris. Next, Jared.
Shelley Edmondson.
Shelley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Jared. I'll make this brief. I just wanted to add a tiny bit to the ferry poster discussion, because just recently they decided to allocate some of their poster slots for nonprofit organizations, and so they're doing, I think, a quarter of the space is just for nonprofits, and they do some sort of lottery where you apply, and if you get selected by the lottery, they'll cover the cost of your poster. So not that the risk isn't there for other ads, but at least I think they did listen to your comments, Dan, and they're trying to do a better job. But that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Shelley. Any other hands, Jared?
Lastly, Bill Doyle.
Bill, you're recognized.
Yes, again, briefly, like everyone else, on the price of yellowtails. The retail market today is controlled by previously frozen, primarily Pacific flatfish. If we want to get our flatfish back in the market and get the prices up. One of the things we have to address is proper labeling at the retail level, which lists country of origin and then clearly states previously frozen. The customer's perception is they're walking into a supermarket and they're getting Bill Amoru's son's yellowtails, but in reality, they're probably getting a previously frozen arrowtooth flounder from either side of the Pacific. So I'm not sure who would be, what agency would be in charge of truth and labeling, but I think that would go a long ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Absolutely
What?
true.
Any more hands, Jared?
No hands, Mr. Chair.
Then we can move along to action items. Let's open it up to striped bass total length management.
Mr. Chair, before we proceed, did you want me to provide the statement on process for today?
By all means.
All right. Good morning, Commission members. We have an exceptionally busy agenda today. There are 11 regulatory recommendations from DMF for the Commission to deliberate and vote on, and several of these recommendations are multifaceted. Additionally, there are 6 management items for which DMF seeks Commission feedback, but do not require a formal vote, as well as updates on interstate and federal fisheries management. As Dan described, this is an unfortunate product of the regulatory framework that we function within, and this presents annual challenges to timely modify management programs for the upcoming season. I think I speak for both the chairman and the director when I express my appreciation to y'all for the time dedicated to review and consider the public comment received, both for and against DMS various public hearing proposals, as well as the agency's final recommendations, which attempt to find balance and consider DMS management objectives, the varying interests of stakeholders expressed in written public comment and in public hearing testimony, and feedback from Commission members provided throughout the extensive rulemaking process. After speaking with Chairman Kane and Director McKiernan yesterday, a decision was made with regards to the conduct of today's meeting. That decision is to maintain the Commission's customary practice of staying public comment until the end of the business meeting. Accordingly, public comment will not be accepted throughout the meeting, including during Commission deliberations on various DMF recommendations. This has generally been the operating protocol for the Commission over the past decade. The reason for this is multifaceted. Stakeholders are afforded well-defined, extensive, and publicized public process to review DMF's public hearing proposals, discuss various proposals with DMF staff and Commission members, attend public hearings to further hear from DMF on these proposals, and provide verbal testimony, and lastly, to submit written public comments to DMF and the Commission for their consideration. The feedback provided during this process is considered extensively by DMF during the crafting of final regulatory recommendations and by the Commission when deliberating and voting on these recommendations. This is a formal process, and it's the most appropriate time for the public to submit their viewpoints. While there have been some benefit to allowing the public comment during Commission deliberations at business meetings, this is generally not the case when the Commission is scheduled to vote on an agency recommendation. Collective experience has shown that it is frequently of limited additional benefit, meaning that it only allows for the reiteration of points already made during the formal public process. Additionally, it can be detrimental by biasing debate towards the viewpoints of those who show up at the 11th hour outside the defined public comment process to lobby for certain outcomes at the expense of the interests of other stakeholders who do not similarly lobby at the conclusion of the formal public process. That said, this is not a hard and fast rule of order, and Chairman Kane has opted to deviate from it in the past. While this most frequently occurs when addressing so-called discussion items, those issues that are being brought forward for initial consideration and not a formal vote, accommodations have also been made for the public comment regarding so-called action items, those final measures that require Commission approval. When this occurs, the chairman has favored an approach whereby one individual is given the floor to speak in favor of an issue and one individual is given the floor to speak against an issue. The strategy works reasonably well during an in-person meeting when the public can be afforded a brief window to step out of the room, caucus among like-minded interests, and appoint a spokesperson. Unfortunately, this does not translate to the virtual meeting format. If we were to want to proceed in that direction, today, the best approach would likely to be allow for extensive public comment on each agenda item. Given the breadth of today's agenda, this would be unwieldy from a time management perspective. Additionally, DMF's recommendations are all well within the framework of its public hearing proposals, and amendments being pursued in the final recommendations are minor modifications based on public comment. Effectively, nothing new is being brought forth at this time that could not have been anticipated and commented on during the prescribed public process. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, this approach would effectively turn this business meeting into an unannounced public hearing and bias the commission's deliberations at the expense of those who did not attend today but did take part in the formal public process. This last point underscores the logic underlying the commission's general operating procedure for public comment at the end of business meetings. For these reasons, the determination was made to maintain this protocol today. With this in mind, we'll proceed through the action items using the following general process. DMF will present on a recommendation. Commission members will be afforded an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. The chairman will seek a motion and a second on a DMF recommendation. Commission members and DMF may debate and deliberate on the motion, and the chairman may conclude the deliberation by calling for a vote, which I will take by roll call. If a motion is not made in support of a recommendation, the director anticipates a recommendation will fail, or the recommended motion is voted down, the director may pull the recommendation or offer a substitute recommendation for the commission's consideration. If a substitute recommendation is provided, the director will follow the same process previously outlined. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. So members understand what is happening and what's happened for years now in the past. At our in-person meetings, as Jared has gone on to say, we get one speaker in favor and one opposed. But it's not going to work in the virtual format. We'll be here until Saturday. All right, so we're going to move along with action items. Striped bass total length management. Nicola, I believe.
Well, Ray, I think I can handle this as to introduce the concept, and Nicola can fill any gaps I may have created. But this is a fairly straightforward concept. It came to our attention when one of our former staffers brought to our attention that there was a tournament going on, a fishing tournament, and like old-fashioned fishing tournament where the heaviest fish gets weighed in, but in the 28 to 31 inch slot, it seemed kind of silly because the person who won was measuring the fish length different than the people who were losing. So it's like, oh yeah, we gotta address this. And Nicola did a kind of a East Coast or a Northeast survey of states and their rules about how one needs to measure a striped bass. And between, there was a lot of variability. In some cases, it was baked into the regulation. In some cases, it was, written in their sport fish guide, but not necessarily, in the regulation. So it is an issue that we're planning on bringing to the ASMFC Striped Bass Management Board. On the recreational side, this 3 inch slot limit, if, as you can see in this chart, it's what otherwise would be 28 to 31 actually could vary as much as 27.7 to 32.4, depending on how you fan that tail. So a 3 inch slot limit is a little more than 4.5 inches in that instance. So we need consistent measurements. This has been endorsed by our environmental police as a more consistent way to measure it. And again, this only affects the recreational fishery at this time because we don't have a slot limit on the commercial side, and we're not bringing that forward, today and probably not for the season. But I think we can dispense with this fairly quickly. It's straightforward, and it is consistent with that which we brought to you as a proposal back in the fall.
Thank you, Dan. Any members need clarity on the recommendation? If not, I need a motion.
Not seeing any hands raised for clarifying questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. I need a motion and I need a second, and then I'll be on the board, open to discussion.
I'll make the motion, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley.
I'll
And
second it.
seconded by
Suki.
Suki. Thank you. All right, it's open. It's on the board, open for discussion. Any discussion on this item?
Not seeing any hands raised for deliberation, Mr. Chair.
So is this a roll call vote, Jared, or?
Yes, they will all be roll call votes in virtual meetings.
Thank you, Jared. If there's no further discussion, I'm calling the vote.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all. Moving on. Commercial Menhaden Management.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and commission members. For Menhaden, we have 3 areas of the management approach to discuss. Only the first one, which you see on the screen now, the trip limit, requires a vote from the commission. This part of it seeks your support to change one of the trip limit triggers that we have for the commercial fishery. Those triggers essentially scale down the limits as the quota is consumed in an attempt to balance out utilizing the quota as well as the season length and allowing for small scale access to occur throughout the season. Currently, one of the triggers, when you hit 90% of the quota, provided it happens prior to September 1st, it drops the trip limit down to 6,000 pounds. This trigger specifically was adopted when, due to a change in the fishery management plan at the ASMC level, purse seiners were no longer allowed to continue to fish after the quota was taken. So we essentially tried to build in that small scale access into the quota management approach. However, at the current quota level, we have about 10 million pounds. And at our current effort levels, which we're also seeking to kind of cap today, that 10% of quota at a 6,000 pound limit is leaving quota unused. And it also hinders the fleet's ability to access the episodic event set aside because states have to use their quota up entirely prior to September 1st to access that additional quota. So the proposal here, we had proposed, a range of options of whether or not to rescind the quota or change the trip level. Can you go back one slide, Bradley? Yep. We had proposed whether or not to rescind the trigger entirely or change the percentage. And based on the public comment that we received, we came up with the approach to modify this such that it change it to a 98% trigger, that only if that happens on or after September 1st, the trip limit will be dropped to 6,000 pounds. In this way, it'll encourage the quota to be taken before September 1st, when states have the ability to opt into the episodic event set aside. However, if the fishery did continue into September at that, and we got to 98% of the quota being used, it would drop the trip limit to 6,000 pounds, so that about 200,000 pounds at current quota levels would be set aside for the small scale fishery to continue. This recommendation takes into consideration the public comment that was largely in favor of modifying this trigger, but still with a little bit of concern about totally rescinding it. So this balances our ability to access the episodic event set aside and also keep some quota late season for a small scale. And we can also still pursue and likely could achieve some quota transfers if the episodic event set aside were taken already, or if that 2% set aside isn't enough in September. So that we're gonna, I think, go through each of the Menhaden proposals, and then we'll come back to the action on this one. So the next slide looks at the effort controls that we are intending to move forward with. The plan is to restrict the renewal of the Menhaden endorsements in 2026 to those that meet a minimum threshold of activity, which is one landing of at least 6,000 pounds between January 1st, 2014 and August 1st, 2023. That's a 10-year period. Or those who hold the Menhaden endorsement in conjunction with a fish weir endorsement. We are not planning to take any action, as was considered, on limiting access to the open entry cap per seine endorsement. So you'll recall that these control dates were adopted about 1.5 years for both the endorsements due to concern about potential new effort in the fishery. There is significant latent effort in both endorsements, and the cap per seine permit, as I said, is open entry, and there was a jump in issuance in the last several years. Not necessarily a use, but issuance. So our approach here is to remove that latent effort from the Menhaden endorsements because we feel like we're doing a pretty good job of managing the quota, providing for a profitable fishery, and minimizing user conflict at the current quota level and participation level. But activation of more additional large-scale effort would really disrupt that. So the controls that we've proposed specifically, we believe the preliminary analysis would reduce the number of Menhaden endorsements from 51 in 2024 to 18 in 2026. That includes 13 that qualify based on activity and 5 that qualify based on having the fish weir endorsement. We are using the 10-year reference period prior to the control date. That includes all of the years in which the Menhaden endorsement has been issued, and it also retains several historical users that were, involved in what quota we initially got from the ASMFC that would otherwise be removed if we use the 5-year reference period that was also part of the public hearing proposal. The 6,000 pound activity level is aligned with the limited entry access level. And it's also consistent with the initial criteria that we used to issue the Menhaden endorsements. And similar as to when Menhaden endorsements were initially issued, it continues to issue these, keep the endorsements available for those with a fish weir so that they can opportunistically land Menhaden that are caught. This action was widely supported at the public hearing. It was also the public testimony that convinced us not to move forward with limiting access to the cap per seine endorsements at this time. The comment largely supported keeping this open entry to allow individuals to access and gain experience at the small scale level for lobstermen to continue to collect their own bait. And there was not a great deal of concern about the 6,000 pound limit impacting the quota, particularly as most of the cap per seine endorsement holders, current or prospective, will not have the inshore net permit. But the control date will remain on the books, and we can reconsider this action in the future if the situation changes. And then lastly, the third action is addressing a pilot program to allow for harvesters to share their catch. We intend to launch a new pilot program this year that will allow the Menhaden per seine vessels to share their catch with another similarly permitted and rigged vessel. This would be restricted to all of the Menhaden endorsement holders and only those cap per seine endorsement holders with landings the prior year. And under the program, a vessel would be allowed to partner with one other vessel in a day. It doesn't have to be the same vessel every day, but it would allow them, a partner vessel, to remove fish from the other vessel's net and then bring it ashore themselves so that each of the two vessels could land the trip limit, as opposed to the current rules that require the second vessel to be a carrier vessel and the aggregate limit of the two vessels cannot exceed the trip limit. So this pilot program was based on an industry request to allow for a program similar to what Maine authorizes, which is intended to reduce the release of dead fish, such as if a set exceeds the trip limit. And we also think there could be a benefit to just the vessels getting off the water sooner and helping to avoid user conflict, particularly in the more heavily utilized areas. So we are designing it in a way to really try to restrict this program causing new effort in the fishery, which is why the cap per seine endorsements that are eligible to participate would have to have landings the prior year. And so we're going to, be looking at how this functions very closely this year before continuing it. But we do see the benefit to this industry request and plan to accommodate it this year. So
Are
yep.
we good, Nicola?
That is it. And the next slide here has the one action item that is the recommended motion.
Good morning, and thank you very much. So, members, does Nicola need to explain anything? Is there clarity needed in this recommendation before we put a motion on the board? And
Dan, did you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to let the commission know that my view of this is that it is a little easier than some of our other management measures because it is a single species fishery. But this is such an incredibly well-informed proposal because we held an informal scoping meeting with the industry in the fall, got their initial ideas. Nicola's been collaborating with her other states to learn how they deal with things like the transfer or the sharing of fish if somebody gets too much in the net. I'm really proud of the details in this one because I think we're satisfying not only the participants, but we've taken the feedback on trying to maintain other folks who might want to get into this fishery at a slightly lower amount. So this is a really good proposal, and I want to give Nicola and the staff a lot of credit for putting it together.
thank you, Dan. Back to the members. Clarity?
Not seeing a request for clarifying questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. I'll need a motion.
I'll make the motion, Ray.
Thank you.
Suki.
And the second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Bill. Let's open it up to discussion. Is there any discussion?
Suki Sawyer.
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to comment on the passing of fish. It's almost like a no-brainer because it's going to save a lot of fish from dying for no particular reason. Like Dan said, sometimes, you don't know how much is in the net till you get the net up, up to the boat and start drying it up. And to be able to pass fish around gets the guys off the water quicker, and it saves a lot of effort, unnecessary effort, where the guy's sitting right there alongside of him and he's got to wait till he gets clear and lets him go and try to scoop him up himself. So this is a real good part of this whole motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Suki. Yeah, I have one question to Nicola. I understand that purse seiners will be able to pass fish or have another seiner come alongside and pump fish. Is that also true of the 6,000 pound permits? Like an individual who sets a net, a lobsterman, he might have 8,000 pounds in the net. Can another small boat come alongside?
Yes, provided they are similarly permitted and rigged to purse seine themselves. So it would have to be a cap purse seine endorsement holder and then another cap purse seine endorsement holder that is also rigged to catch menhaden. They could share from that one net.
Great, thank you for that answer, because I agree with Suki. There's no sense in, when you get fish mortality, it should be used. So anyways, thank you very much for that answer, Nicola. I need a motion.
You have a motion from Suki, seconded by Bill Doyle on the board.
I'm sorry, Jared. Then roll call vote.
Suki, did you have a follow-up question, or can I put your hand down? Nope, hand down. All right. Not seeing any other hands raised for debate, so I will call the roll. Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Before we move on to this next commercial summer flounder management, I hate to put more work on you, Jared, but is Lieutenant Bass still on? And I'm just wondering, because I know in years past, we've come up with recommendations and approved them, and then enforcement has come back to us. So I'm just wondering if enforcement is privy to these action items and if they do consult with EMF staff prior to the meeting.
I could say I spent a lot of time consulting with MEP, particularly Lieutenant Bass, and they do receive these, and we do take their feedback, but I can certainly let Matt or Chris, if he's still on the call, speak for themselves.
No, I won't disagree with that.
So, all right, it's just, as you well know, Lieutenant Bass, I'm not saying recently, but in years past, we've come forward with recommendations and we've approved, or DMF has come forward and we've approved them on a commission level. And then enforcement comes back to us. And over the years, I know our relationship has gotten so much better between enforcement and DMF. And I was just curious. So we don't have that conundrum constantly, in the face. So thank you for your response. All right, let's move along. Commercial summer flounder management.
All right, I'll be taking this one today. So we have a, six-part recommendation, as well as a discussion on the consecutive daily limit program for 2025. But I'll begin with a little bit of background on summer flounder management. I don't want to beat a dead horse, because I think we've talked about this extensively over the past 4 or 5 years as the quota has gone up and down, and we've kind of rearranged the management program in response to quota changes and fishery performance. But just to give a quick overview of 2025, we have a 571,000 pound quota under the current quota allocation structure. The period 1 fishery receives 30%. That's about 170,000 pounds. The period 2 fishery receives the other 70%. That's about 400 pounds. The period 1 fishery is the winter fishery from January 1 to April 22nd. And the period 2 fishery is everything after that, but it's predominantly the summer fishery that occurs in our inshore state waters. Back at our December meeting, the commission took an action for an in-season adjustment for the 2025 period 1 summer flounder fishery, which was to reduce the trip limit from 5,000 pounds to 2,000 pounds. Additionally, Director McKiernan informed the commission and the public that he would not be renewing the multi-state landing program for 2025. That is the program that allows offshore vessels in period 1 to come into Massachusetts in possession of non-conforming quantities of summer flounder to be offloaded in other states. Accordingly, for this year, the vessels coming into Massachusetts could only be in possession of a Massachusetts limit. They could also not possess a Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York limit. I think the combined effect of these two things dramatically reduced landings in Massachusetts during period 1 of 2025. So far to date, the fisheries only landed at about 4% of the total quota, about 25,000 pounds. And as a result, I'm anticipating we'll have a rollover of quota allocation from period 1 to period 2 to the effect of about 120,000 pounds, which is a substantial, almost, more than 30% increase in that quota allocation. The period 2 fisheries scheduled to open on April 23rd. And, part of our recommendation is to potentially look at those limits that the fishery will open under this season. Next slide. But before we get to that, we have a couple recommendations for period 1. The first, one of the aspects of this recommendation is to codify in regulation the trip limit adjustment that the commission took in December via an in-season adjustment to reduce the period one trip limit from 5,000 pounds to 2,000 pounds. The second aspect of this recommendation is to adjust the historic quota allocations or quota allocation for the period one fishery. We're recommending to reduce that by 50% from 30% of overall quota to 15% of the overall quota. The purpose of the quota allocation change is to make more quota available to the summer period fishery when the resource is more available to more of our permit holders and the fish tends to have a higher X vessel value. Looking back on the data for the past 3 seasons, average X vessel value during the summertime fishery, May to September, was about $3.40 compared to the wintertime fishery, we'll call it October through April, which was about $1.90. So it's a significantly more valuable and it's available to more of our permit holders during the summertime period. We view that as a better use of the quota allocation given to us. Additionally, we think a lower trip limit will slow the quota consumption rate to achieve a longer season and reduce the risk of a seasonal overage, meaning that the period one fishery won't, land a bunch of fish on one day and then end up exceeding its seasonal allocation. There are concerns that do exist, among our permit holders and shoreside infrastructure seafood dealers about the potential for quota utilization if too much quota is allocated to the summertime fishery. And we view if that does occur, we can kind of open up the fall fishery in October 1 to provide more access to that quota. But we're dealing at current quota levels. We're fairly confident that this quota will be taken during the late summer or early fall. Additionally, were we to reduce the quota allocation from 30 to 15%, the director may reconsider renewing the multi-state landing program for 2026 to provide those offshore vessels with more robust access to the period one quota allocation so they can better access that 15% that they're allocated. Because as we saw this year, by eliminating that program and implementing a 2,000 pound trip limit, it really handcuffed their ability to take the quota allocated to them. Next slide. So with regards to the summertime fishery specifically, we have a series of 6 period 2 or series of several period 2 recommendations. These recommendations are in part informed by a industry meeting we had back in November. There was a lot of comment from the industry about how to manage this fishery and a lot of differing opinions. There are, some folks in the summertime fishery that would like to see that quota taken during the summer by the end of August because they shift over into other fisheries in the fall because the fish is more valuable in the summer and the price starts to diminish in the fall, and because fishing opportunities in the Nantucket Sound or south of the Cape area become more diminished in the fall given weather and the movement of the fish offshore. However, there is also an interest, particularly among some of the local boats, in maintaining some quota into September to accommodate rod and reel fishing, particularly on Nantucket shoals, as well as bycatch in the trawl fleet when they're fishing for horseshoe crabs or whelk at that time of year. There's also a concern about taking too many steps this year to safeguard the quota through the season, that it will handcuff our ability to consume it, resulting in an underage. And that's something that we've tried to balance throughout this is, trying to take steps to lead that quota into September, but not so many steps that we've create such a buffer that we eliminate our ability to take the quota given to us, and we have a significant rollover to the fall fishery. Accordingly, our recommended approach really favors the use of quota-based triggers as opposed to substantial changes in open fishing days or trip limits. We think the use of quota-based triggers will help us better respond to things that we can't predict, like in-season changes in effort, movement from the groundfish fleet into the Nantucket Sound, south of Cape, trawl fishery for summer flounder given low cod limits. I mean, activation of new permits, movement of vessels into this fishery. We just really can't predict to what extent that may occur this year. So building in trip limit triggers will help us buffer against that by saying, for instance, the amending the existing trigger that reduces trip limits once 75% of the quota is used on August 1, moving that back to August 15 to buy more time to hit that trigger, and adopting a new trip limit trigger of to reduce the trip limits for all gears to 200 pounds should 90% of the quota be taken before September 1. This would be, both of these in concert would be able to work to slow quota consumption should we be achieving our quota more rapidly than we anticipate, while also maintaining the ability to take it if we're not. We're also recommending 2 minor modifications to the fishing rules for this season to slow quota consumption and reduce using user group conflicts on the fishing grounds. And to slow quota consumption, we're looking at small trip limit adjustments for both the net fishers, reducing that trip limit from 600 pounds to 500 pounds, and for hook fishers, reducing their limit by 400 pounds to 325 pounds. That maintains that same 2-to-3 ratio or the hook fisheries trip limit being 2/3 of the net fisheries trip limit, which has historically been the case for this fishery during the summertime. Lastly, we're recommending to eliminate Saturdays as an open fishing day, both to slow quota consumption and to manage some user group conflicts on the fishing grounds between recreational fishing and commercial fishing. That open fishing day adjustment would only occur at the start of the summertime season, April 23rd through August 31. We'd maintain the current 7 open fishing day schedule on September 1, as recreational fishing tends to slow during the fall, and weather conditions are such that we'd want to accommodate more fishing opportunity for the commercial fleet to take their quota as the weather deteriorates in the fall. So those are the recommendations we have for period 1. Next slide will deal with the consecutive daily trip limit program. This is a program that we first put into place in 2019 to enhance the economic efficiency of the fleet and address on the water safety concerns for draggers. Effectively, what the program allows is for a dragger fishing in the summertime fishery to fish 2 consecutive calendar days, take a 1 limit one day and 1 limit the next, and land a double limit on that second day. Historically, there had been a buy boat on Nantucket that allowed vessels to come into Nantucket Harbor, offload their fish from day 1 onto a buy boat, and then go back out and be closer to the fishing grounds that next day and continue. There's no longer a buy boat. So this kind of replaced that buy boat concept by allowing vessels to lay up overnight at sea and not come back to port every night. That reduces the amount of steaming time, that reduces dockage costs for some vessels. There's some boats that don't like to, that are trying to avoid paying dockage while participating in this fishery by coming in as infrequently as possible, given some of the expensive dockage situations on the Cape. This program has been successful in achieving its goals of making the fleet more economically efficient and reducing some safety issues. It's also allowed dealers to more efficiently service a variety of Cape ports, taking fish from Woods Hole all the way down to Chatham, by staggering when fish is coming in and kind of working with their boats so that they don't have to be everywhere at once, particularly as there's now fewer dealers servicing the Cape. However, there are concerns about this program. There are folks who are concerned that this results in more expedient quota utilization, and that's kind of exacerbated when you combine higher trip limits. With a higher trip limit, it becomes more likely that an offshore boat may use this as kind of an aggregate program and participate in our summertime fishery where they historically haven't. At 600 pounds or 800 pounds, it might not be profitable for an offshore boat to do a 2-day trip and land in Massachusetts, but 1,000 pounds or 1,200 pounds, it may be, and it has been. So we've seen an influx of offshore boats that have moved into this fishery or land quota against our summertime fishery. That's actually, it's been argued that this has led to more expedient quota utilization. We certainly saw that last year. It's also been argued that, with the influx of these boats into the program, that they're frequently violating the daily trip limits, leaving New Bedford at say 6 o'clock at night, towing overnight and coming back in the next morning with a double limit of fluke and not taking 600 one day and 600 the next day. And by towing overnight, I mean towing overnight in federal waters where you can do that. State waters would have the night closure. And then this has kind of evolved beyond the purpose of the program. And there are several folks in the industry that would like to see us eliminate it or reconsider it. We thought long and hard about it, and while we understand the concerns raised by the industry, we think its benefits outweigh those concerns, but we are interested in addressing some of those concerns. So while we do look to reauthorize this program for the current year, we're also looking to require vessels not offload within 24 hours of the start of the trip. And things that we may consider in the future would be, mandatory electronic cellular monitoring for participants, and we do reserve the authority to discontinue the program should performance exceed our expectations or we hit a certain quota threshold in the season, such as 90% before, September 1. That said, we also are looking to eliminate the catch tagging requirement part of this program, where we've been requiring effectively a track tag to be put on the catch from day 1 to separate it from the catch from day 2. This has become, particularly for horseshoe crabs and as this has expanded to other species, this has become really onerous to separately tag each container of fish of the varieties of species that are taken. And instead, we're just looking to have that catch from day 1 segregated from the catch to day 2 and labeled as such to kind of reduce the administrative burden on our end, as well as the compliance burden on the end of the harvesters. So next slide. So with that, here's our recommended motion as set forth in the memo. And I am available to take any questions from the commission on this subject.
Commission members, do we need any clarity on this recommendation? If not, I need a motion on the board.
I'll make the motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Bill Doyle, and seconded by
I'll second it.
who's that? Bill Amaru?
Bill
Yes, that
Amaru.
is Bill Amaru.
Thank you, Bill. Jared?
Bill Amaru's ready to debate this.
Okay,
Well, don't we? Okay, all right.
whatever you say, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, debate.
Okay, well, I'm not going to debate anything here, Jared. I appreciate the usual detail and analysis and presentation of this plan, and I'm in favor of it in terms of its intent. But you've just outlined, so I don't have to, the negative aspects of the double trip limit possession ruling that's going to continue this year. And I just want to again point out that due to what I believe will be it's a substantial increase in the pressure on these fish by draggers that would otherwise be fishing in the Georges fishery for groundfish due to the constraints of the upcoming limits on cod and other restrictions. This fishery will be exploited to the degree that it will close earlier than last year, and it will again strand the vessels that fish to the east in the shoals that you outlined earlier, that fish later in the year with even less opportunity to catch the fish that we normally make at least 50% of our income from during the last 2 weeks of August and the first 2 weeks of September. I agree that the price does drop after the initial summer vacation season ends, but fish that you don't catch are worth nothing versus fish that you do catch that might be worth $2 a pound. So there isn't any benefit, as far as I'm concerned, by trying to scoop up everything we can earlier in the season at the higher price. The balancing act between gear classes and fishing interests is a great challenge, and you guys have done a very good job of analyzing and addressing both sides of the fishery, the fixed gear, the mobile gear, and the hook gear sectors. And I applaud you for that. I just don't agree that these limits are going to, in fact, extend the season and not increase the mortality that's going to occur much earlier in the season. I would have made the limits lower if it had been me. I see that the proportions that each organizational directed fishery takes are in proportion with each other, and that's the way it should be. But they should have both have been lower than they are to extend the season. If we closed down last year towards the end of August, do you remember offhand, Jared?
I believe August 27th was the last open day, and we closed on the 28th.
Right. So, I mean, I believe that we're going to lose at least 2 weeks, perhaps more, this coming season. And that's not going to stop me from voting in favor of this. It's very, very thoughtfully crafted and explained by staff. But I'm predicting that it's going to be a difficult year, and that there'll be pressure placed on other fisheries early in the year, and that larger boats have the leeway to be able to slide into other fisheries, whereas the boats that are smaller and fishing close are going to be limited. And I believe that's what will happen and I hope I'm wrong, as I've said before, but my experience over the years tells me that this is probably the way it'll pay out. Other than that, I'll vote in favor of this. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment and for all the time that the Division of Marine Fisheries has spent on this, and specifically with me as an individual as we were talking about this as it evolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just briefly respond to Bill. I agree with a lot of what Bill said there, and I share a lot of Bill's concerns. And I think we've debated them a lot internally, and I think that the difference of opinion between Bill and DMF on this isn't so much on the concerns, but it's on how much of a buffer do we need to build. And I'm concerned personally about taking too many steps to constrain effort at the start of the season, whereby October 1 we have a bunch of quota that we're looking to offload onto the offshore boats at $1.90 a pound that could have been made available to the inshore boats at $3.40 a pound. And I take to heart Bill's concerns about the quota use and effort moving into this fishery, and I share them. I struggle with trying to find that balance between letting the summertime fishery access this fish at a higher price, and making sure that season is as long as possible, with the risk of turning a bunch of the quota that should have been available to them over to the offshore boats in the winter for a lower price. And I too hope Bill is wrong and I'm right on this, because I won't take any pleasure in being wrong about this.
Thank you, Jared. Any other discussion?
I'm not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair. I'll move to roll call vote.
By all means.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Vote passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. I guess we should do a 5-minute biological break now.
Okay, I'll pause the recording. Bradley, could you put up a slide that says the commission will return at 10:30?
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner, I am reconvening this meeting.
Okay. I believe groundfish management is next, and I'll be taking that one.
Yeah, you're right. Commercial groundfish management. Please, Jared.
Once
Move
Bradley
forward.
gets the slides up, I will start.
Thank you.
Okay. So like the prior two recommendations, this is kind of multifaceted. The first aspect of this looks at groundfish, non-codfish groundfish trip limits, specifically yellowtail flounder and monkfish. We're recommending to increase both of these trip limits, the yellowtail flounder trip limit from 350 pounds to 500 pounds, and the monkfish trip limit from 536 pounds tail weight to 1,000 pounds tail weight. Purpose of these is to provide greater access to the state waters fleet to stocks where there is a more available subcomponent, and to take the and in doing so, kind of take the stress off the low limits for cod and the low availability of cod. Yellowtail flounder trip limits have been trending downwards in state waters due to reduced participation in this fishery. And there's currently room to liberalize these trip limits without threat of exceeding the state water subcomponent that's showed in the table below, where we see landings in fishing year 2019 at about 94,000 pounds to the most recent complete fishing year 2023. The 2024 fishing year is still ongoing through the end of April, so we don't have the final tally there. And those landings are, 19,000 pounds. So we've seen a dramatic decrease in this fishery, in part due to reduced participation and likely in part to what we spoke to earlier in the meeting, the price. With a subcomponent of 62,000 pounds for this upcoming season, we think we can certainly liberalize those trip limits up to 500 pounds. And that would make that trip limit consistent with the winter flounder trip limit for the Gulf of Maine. The monkfish trip limit increase came from a request from a state waters gill netter, Chris Chadwick. He noted that this would make it more profitable for him to use large mesh gill nets to target monkfish in some of the deeper areas of state waters. And we reviewed that request and supported it. So those are the two proposals or the two recommendations on non-cod groundfish trip limits. Next slide. The second aspect of this recommendation deals with cod management. There's two recommendations here. The first is kind of administrative. It's moving our our cod management areas for state waters to match the spatial changes to the cod stock management areas in Amendment 25. Effectively, what this does is renames the Gulf of Maine cod management area, the Western Gulf of Maine cod management area, and moves that boundary down from the 42 line up off Truro on the east side of the Cape, all the way down to the southern extent of the state waters boundary south of Nantucket on the 70th meridian on the east side of the Cape and Nantucket to match the federal cod stock areas. You'll see that kind of more clearly in the maps on the left-hand side of that slide, or right-hand side of that slide rather. The second aspect is to establish a moratorium on the retention and possession of southern New England cod by all fishers. This matches the federal action. It backstops it. We don't have a state waters fishery for cod in the southern New England cod management areas in state waters, Nantucket Sound, Buzzards Bay, Vineyard Sound. But there is a fishery, south of that on Cox's in federal waters, and we wouldn't want to create a loophole where a non-existent state waters fishery creates a loophole for non-conforming fish to be landed. It is worth noting that if there is kind of a delay between our rulemaking and federal rulemaking, that our federal permit holders could continue to fish under federal rules and land that fish in Massachusetts in the southern New England cod area. Should that moratorium not go into effect for several months at the federal level, or whatever that delay may be, they wouldn't be bound by the more restrictive state rule. Our groundfish regulations specify that the limits do not apply to federal permit holders lawfully fishing under federal rules. We're not making any recommendations to change the Gulf of Maine or Western Gulf of Maine cod trip limit. We had proposed reducing that down from 400 pounds to some lower level, or adopting a seasonal closure or seasonal bycatch limit to slow the harvest of that, given the subcomponent for Western Gulf of Maine cod in state waters is about 44,000 pounds for this upcoming fishing year that starts on May 1. And our landings have been right around 44,000 pounds the past few years. Our proposal highlighted a concern that DMF has and is worth reiterating about exceeding the state water subcomponent for this stock. And should the full ACL or annual catch limit for Western Gulf of Maine cod be exceeded, which is not unlikely given the low limits set in Framework 69, that our state water, exceedance of the state water subcomponent could potentially trigger an accountability measure for federal permit holders, and that's of significant concern to DMF, given the challenges we've had in terms of maintaining access to that state water subcomponent through the council. And if our fishery does trigger a federal accountability measure, there'll be more pressure on DMF to more strictly manage that state waters fishery, and that could have really down the road challenges for the remaining folks and our remaining GE permit holders. So while we are concerned about that, the argument was made that there's been significant attrition in this fishery. Landings are on the decline. We expect attrition to continue. Cod abundance is low. Let's keep things where they are for this year and run that risk of that attrition and availability are going to slow landings enough that will be under the state water subcomponent, and we're willing to go for that for this year, but do want to put on record our concerns about triggering a federal accountability measure and what that may mean for the state waters fishery moving forward. The next slide deals with a permitting aspect that does not require a commission vote today, but is something we want to put on your radar. We're looking to move the control date for the groundfish endorsement, which allows directed fishing in state waters for non-federal permit holders. We want to update that from December 31, 2018 to December 31, 2024. This is driven by kind of concerns about what may be going on with the federal fishery or the federal management of this fishery and the low allocations for groundfish stocks, particularly cod. And while we don't think we'll have to use the control date moving forward, there is uncertainty there. There's a lot of latent activity in this fishery. We have 484 endorsements that were issued last year, and less than 50 active permit holders, with only 15 to 20 of them being highly active. So given how low our state water subcomponents are and how close we are to them on critical species like cod, the activation of any amount of latent effort could be problematic for this fishery moving forward. So we want to have all the tools in the toolkit to deal with that should we need to. And one of those would be potentially further limiting access to this fishery. And if we're going to do that, we think it's best to use the most inclusive control date to include any of the permits that may have been active over the past 6 years from 2019 through 2024. Should we need to use it? We're not proposing to use it at this time, but if we do need to use it next year or the year after, we want to be able to be inclusive, and that involves us having to update that endorsement now. So this is kind of making sure that we have the toolbox tomorrow today. So at this point, I will take any questions on this recommendation.
Any discussion points need to be made, or clarity, I should say, by commission members?
Not Bill Amaru.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this is the right place in the discussion to mention the points that I'd like to bring out. I started in fisheries management in 1988, some 40 years ago, at a time when there was still robust stocks of cod, flounders, and these other stocks that we're talking about. And in that period of time, I've watched virtually every stock decline with the management strategy that we did both federally and in state levels. We have seen ratcheting up on every level on the commercial fishing industry. If it isn't apparent by now that something isn't working after nearly 50 years of adventures in fisheries management, we have to have our heads examined. It is not accomplishing the goals. We're constantly chasing our tails. It's time for the leaders in government and in science to admit that there's something going on that we're not addressing when it comes to rebuilding our fish stocks and building them back up. And I'm not the one who claims to know what those things are, but I know we're not discussing them. And until we do, we're going to be sitting here at a table talking about pounds instead of thousands of pounds of fish that can be allocated out. It's disturbing. I've grown from a relatively young man into an old man watching this process, and if we can do better. Those are the only comments I have. I'm going to vote in favor of this. Again, it's well thought out. It's clearly presented, and it's probably necessary for us to meet the standards of government, federal and state, that are written into the laws.
Thank you,
not
Bill.
the right laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other points of clarity before we put a motion on the board?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Well, I need a motion. Please, so we can move this meeting along.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
And
Thank
I'll second it.
Thank you, Shelley. Roll call vote.
Bradley, can you move the slide just so the motion's on the board? Thank you. All right, roll call vote. Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Becky Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, all members. Moving along. Controls on use of conch pots in federal zone. Is this you, Dan? Or
It is. Yeah, Ray, I'll take this one and with some help from staff.
Great. To give Jared a break.
Yeah. So we brought this to your attention earlier toward the end of last year, actually, and at the time we were thinking about applying this to all of the pot fisheries, but with commission input, we've scaled this back to just the conch pots that are set for purposes of catching whelk. Commission will recall that we have in our fishery management scheme, a limited entry system, a 200 trap limit, and a minimum size. And that is predominantly a state waters fishery, but what's happened over the last few years is there's been some evidence of the gear being moved into the federal zone, and possibly for purposes of fishing more than the daily limit. So, I'm not the daily limit, I'm sorry, fishing more traps than allowed under the trap limit. So our recommendation is to, for any vessel that's fishing in the EEZ and registered under the laws of the Commonwealth, to need a conch pot permit to fish in our nearshore waters. We would also require all pots that are on the vessel, or for that matter in the EEZ, set by those same fishermen, to have a DMF issued trap tag that helps us control the effort levels. And then again, we limit those participants, or eliminate any loophole that those participants might think that they can fish in excess of the effort limits by just going over the 3 mile line. And this is particularly an issue around Nantucket and east of Nantucket, and also apply that same closure. This is not unlike the way the state of Maine deals with its lobster fishery. Maine's approach to lobster fishing is the Maine rules apply to anyone with a Maine landing permit, even when they go into the EEZ. So our recommendation is the same. We didn't receive any public comment. And one of the things this will do, it will especially make sure that any conch pots that are on a vessel that are going to be set are going to have to be labeled with a valid trap tag. Our current regulations are remiss in that regard. And so the rationale, again, we've got emerging or trending effort to the east over the line. We also have an entanglement and attribution challenge, where if that Massachusetts conch pot is set over in the EEZ, it really does need to be labeled differently than what's in state waters, because we don't want to necessarily be held responsible, for any entanglement that goes there. But that's a consideration. And of course, we know right whales use the areas around Nantucket as well. So as I mentioned before, in our earlier considerations, we thought about making this apply to our sea bass pot fishery, but we've backed off of that. And we're going to work with with NOAA and the take reduction team to make sure that the marking scheme would be appropriate for the EEZ. And so, and also the breakaway gears, et cetera, that which is part of our large whale take reduction plan regulations. We want to make sure that we're going to be consistent with that to minimize any injuries should there be an entanglement. So that's the proposal, and I'll take any questions.
Questions, Jared?
Suki?
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. Just in, well, you took it off, but it says haul gear from January to April, I think, and I think it should say haul out gear or remove gear from the water type of thing. It just says haul gear, conch pots. Doesn't say.
Yeah, that's a typo. It should say haul out.
What's that?
So that's a typo. It should say haul out.
Yeah, okay. So
On that one.
that was my only question.
So, thank you, Suki. Any other hands, Jared?
I'm not seeing any other questions, Mr. Chair.
So, a point of discussion. Dan, how is this going to be enforced? Because state OLE enforces within state waters. So who's going to enforce the trap limit in the EEZ? How are we going to go about doing that?
Well, first, you would have to be, if a vessel was going to set more than 200 traps, including those that they put out in the EEZ, traps would have to be properly tagged, and we do only limit the trap tags. So first, this gives law enforcement a means to enforce the trap limit through the more rigorous enforcement of the need for trap tags. Now, as far as MEP goes, under the joint enforcement agreement, and I'll let Matt Bass speak to this if you'd like, under the joint enforcement agreement that MEP has with NOAA Fisheries, they do patrol in the EEZ, and they can inspect, buoys and fixed gear in the EEZ. And so I'm confident that Mass Environmental Police can accomplish that. I mean, it'll take some planning. They would probably request us to assist them with pot hauling if they don't have the pot hauling ability on whatever boat they may be patrolling in. But I don't think that should be a problem. But I can speak to that.
Thank you, Dan.
And
Well, if there's no more discussion for clarity on this, I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Shelley. Seconded by
Tim Brady.
Tim Brady. Thank you very much. Roll call vote, Jared.
Bill Ammer,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Tookie Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, commission members. Thank you, Jared. Moving along, false albacore and Atlantic bonito catch limits and size limits.
Yep. So, Ray, I'll take this. So thank you. And I think this might be one of the more debated issues, especially among the public. And I know there's been direct outreach to many of the commission members on this. So our proposal is the same as what we brought forward to the commission and to the public at the hearing, is to establish a 16-inch minimum size, which approximates size and maturity, and a 5 fish per person aggregate limit for the two species combined. That in most cases would focus on primarily bonito, because there's way more retention of bonito than there are of false albacore. It would be specific to state waters, and it's applicable to all harvest modes, both recreational and commercial sectors. There's practically no commercial fishery at all for this species. We want to exempt commercial fishes targeting mackerel using mechanized mackerel jigs, and also fish weirs from these limits. These are two sort of historic gear types that have catch of these species, especially in the case of small bonito, when some of the information we've received anecdotally is the mechanized jiggers in the fall fishing for mackerel can run into these, and they look so similar to mackerel. And these fish are not handled one at a time, but they're mechanically just ripped off the hooks and put into containers. So I want to make this clear that this would not be enforced in the EEZ. This would simply be a state rule for state waters. And of course, state waters includes the donut hole of Nantucket Sound. Everybody knows that. But so what's interesting about this is Massachusetts is by and far the largest harvester of bonito on the East Coast. The historic catch averages about 35% of the total in Massachusetts of all the states. Not so much for false albacore, where the average is around 13%, where Florida is the biggest one at 56%. And just last year, we had an enormous spike in the catch of bonito, and we presented that at the public hearing, and we actually had a threefold increase above any previous year of bonito reported catches in the MRIP system. And there's a there's a constituency that sees increased dependence on these species with the loss of a summertime striped bass fishery in our southern waters because of stock declines, but also water temperature. Bluefish also are less abundant, and there's a whole bunch of operators fishing on the south, off our south coast and islands, that these two species are really becoming the mainstay. And so this is a precautionary proposal being brought forth by us. It originally was brought to our attention about 3 or 4 years ago when there was some concern by some private anglers about large quantities. When I say large, I mean buckets, of quantities of very small young of the year bonito basically being taken, and I guess for purposes of lobster bait or whatever else. And in their mind and their view, this is kind of an important. I'll use the term game fish, but that's their view. I don't like to use that term, but a fish that's very important to them. They were kind of horrified that we'd be taking them as 9 inches for purposes of bait. And so that's how it came to us at first. And so I did take it to the ASMFC and discussed it with the policy board. And there has been some ongoing work on false albacore as well as bonito. So these two species, while they're distinct, they're often caught, seasonally together, and they look very similar. I mean, the experienced angler can tell them apart, but the inexperienced, not so much. And so when I talked about this at the interstate level, I wasn't able to get ASMFC at this time to sort of tackle it, because this is a species that's managed under the HMS. It's a federally managed species that ICAT, oversees. And so, at the time, people really weren't interested in taking on this at a regional level, but there is interest among some of the states to adopt some measures. And I would predict that if we enact this rule, I think we'll get the attention of the other states, and there may be or I would expect some similar progress in those other states as well. So it is precautionary. I know that there's been a lot of comments that have come in writing about the need for this fish to be used, I guess, as tuna bait. That's kind of what the original petitioners were concerned about, was this what they felt was a highly valued species being used as bait. But it's important to recognize that our jurisdiction in this case is going to be limited to state waters. If someone is out in the EEZ and wants to live line some of these fish, they certainly can, especially fish that are undersized. But we think that 5 fish limit, especially if there's 2, 3, 4, 5 people on a boat, you're talking about 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 fish that can be in possession. And we believe to some degree that accommodates this. So I know there's some folks who are not comfortable, based on the written record. There are folks who aren't comfortable with, managing without a federal, without a mandate and a really well researched and well documented stock assessment. On the other hand, we're a big player in this fishery. We think that this proposal would help maintain status quo and maybe constrain the excessive catches at this time until we get a stock assessment. And Jared Silver, I think you had shared with me this morning, and I apologize for the commission if you haven't seen this yet, but we looked at the MRIP data to see the frequency of retained catch. Jared, would you be able to put those up? This would be MRIP data. It shows how frequent people keep 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah, Dr. Scoble sent me some analysis he did. I'll bring that up right.
Yeah, and this is we brought this up because we were having conversations, as we're wrestling with the recommendations and trying to digest the public comment. I think this has some real value here. So you can see, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, that's kind of where the fishery is now. It's kind of a rare event to see higher numbers. And of course, what we learned about MRIP yesterday is that, if Jared and I are fishing on a boat and Jared catches 4 fish and I catch 1, well, that's not 2.5 fish per person, but that is how it could be enforced. In other words, most enforcement is not to the person, but is the aggregate number of fish on a vessel divided by the number of anglers. So this data is actually even more accurate, where again, if Jared catches 4 and I catch 1, well, MRIP tries to capture that. So we think that that this is a fishery that has fairly low retention rates now. It's a huge catch and release fishery, and I would urge the commission to support this as a precautionary measure to get out ahead of management. And I think, passing this now, I think will accelerate the interest in better life history studies and possibly a stock assessment. I know North Carolina was working on some kind of a proposal down in their state, but I believe that if this is enacted, we will be the first. But again, with Bonito, we're responsible for 35% of the catch, and I think that does give us some opportunities and also some responsibility to be conservative. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Any thoughts from commission members in understanding the recommendation?
Not seeing any questions, Mr. Chair. If you want to move for a motion and open for discussion.
Yes, let's move for a motion. So folks, let's move this meeting along. I need a motion.
I move that we accept the recommendations as written. It's Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Seconded by?
I'll second it, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley. So now we have a motion on the board. I'm going to open it up for discussion. Any hands, Jared?
Tim Brady.
Tim, you're recognized.
Hello. Yeah, I can't support this kind of a preemptive motion. I know a lot has gone into this, but there's no real science behind this, and to have a preemptive motion that's going to limit a recreational species that's available to us presently based on the fact that we think we might need the limits. It's just not science. And, I've had a lot of calls on this. I can't support it.
Thank you, Tim. More hands, Jared?
Chris McGuire.
Chris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm strongly in support of these measures. I was really moved by the comments of Captain Amaru earlier about, his basically observing a 40-year decline in species by, despite our management efforts. And I think this kind of precautionary management on fish, on, 2 fish species that we think are probably doing okay, but we don't really know, seems to be the right sort of move. It doesn't seem like, based on all of the data that was presented, that this really poses an economic hardship on many, if any, of the participants in the fishery. And we had a very strong showing both at the in-person meetings and through the comments of support for these kinds of measures. So I'm strongly in support, and I hope that the other commission members will consider supporting this as well. I also really appreciate the opportunity of the DMF staff, who are seen as leaders in conservation by their peers across the ASMFC, taking the first step here, and and hoping that will result in other states taking similar management measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Hands, Jared?
Tim, your hand's up. I don't know if it remains up or if there was a follow-up question. Okay, Suki?
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. My major concern with all this is just the number of fish. I'm not gonna argue about what size they ought to be because of sexual maturity and the future of the fisheries, but I just know tuna fishermen and I guess highly migratory species guys that fish off, out in the canyons, like to use these for bait. And if they gotta catch them in state waters to be able to lug them offshore to go fishing for bluefin tuna or whatever species they're after, I don't, it's only a couple guys on a boat. That's only 10 baits, and that's a long way to go with only 10 baits in your tank. So I get issues with the fish, 5 fish per person. I think it should be higher. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Hands, Jared.
Bill Doyle?
Bill, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. I'm generally in support of this measure. Like Suki, though, I was wondering if we could consider bumping the 5 up to 10, at least for the first year, and have a look at how things go. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Hands, Jared.
Kelly?
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Ray. I just would like to say that I too am in support of this. I think it's smart to be cautious and to have a conservation-minded approach to managing the species with the hope and plan for following up with more data. But I think in lack of that data, taking this precautionary approach is essential. Thanks.
Thank you, Shelley. Hands, Jared.
Bill Amber?
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Jared. Jared, in the definition of mechanized gear, can you be specific about what gear classes this would include? I fish with a hand-operated jigging rig that I'm hoping is included in this description.
Yeah, I think, Bill, our intention was to cover, anything that isn't like a rod and reel sabiki type rig, and it would include hand girdies as well as kind of the computerized electronic gear that's being used in that macro fishery as well.
That was my suspicion, but thank you for clarifying it.
Yep.
Comment would be that I've got to admit, I've been asked by a number of people in the public, all of whom have been very polite, and I recommend that we continue to hear from them on this. I'm confident that this won't be the last time that we discuss this, and it's one of the reasons I can be in favor of it, because I believe if there are any implications that we're not realizing now, we'll be back here to talk about this in the near future. So I want to say that I feel that, as Chris McGuire does, we can get out ahead of something that might give us a possibility of having a good fishery. And I want the citizens of the Commonwealth and other areas that fish on these fish to have access to them. I believe the way this has been designed, they will continue to have access to them. It will still be a profitable target species for charter operations and the general public as well. So I am in favor of the motion and trust that we will in the future be able to deal with any unforeseen consequences that might arise from it. Thank you.
Director McKiernan?
Yeah, address Bill Doyle's his recommendation, and I think if we go back to that plot that we showed earlier, where the mode is like around 2 to 3, or most trips don't take more than 2 or 3 fish. I guess I'd be concerned that for that which the public, brought to our attention, the need to consider this fish worth protecting from basically a bait fishery. I would just be very concerned that if we turned around and made an allowance for this, it's really running counter to the spirit of why folks came to us with such a concern. To reiterate, this doesn't apply in the EEZ, and so I have to believe that the rank and file folks who are using this, if they need a few more than 5 can get those in the EEZ, but I'm trying to address the fishery that's in state waters. And I think overall, when you see images of folks with, just a ton of fish laid out on the bow of a boat, and you're looking at what appears to be 10 fish per angler for a species that is, people are only taking a couple, 2 or 3 now on a good day. I feel like to go to 10 fish would be a mistake, and would kind of frustrate the advocates for a level of conservation, because it really wouldn't constitute much. I mean, if I would suggest adopting this, and over this next year, we can work with the folks who are dependent on this, if they are, and maybe we come back next year and make an amendment. I mean, we wouldn't, nobody would prevent us from amending this in following years, but I would prefer to try to give this a shot at the 5 fish in aggregate level, if you would indulge us for a year.
So, Dan, I have a question. You just said at an aggregate level, are you talking 5 fish per angler or 5 fish for the vessel?
Oh, no, it's always been per angler.
Right, but you
Yeah.
just mentioned the word aggregate.
Well, it's aggregate between the 2 species raised. So it's bonito and false albacore. In total, it's 5. It's
Right.
not 5 albacore and 5 bonito. 5 plus 5 doesn't equal 10. It's 5 in total in the event
Per
that,
angler.
yeah, that per angler, well, per person on the vessel. So yes, per angler. So if there's a captain and a mate and 4 clients, well, that's 6 anglers. 6, you divide the total number divided by 6 for enforcement purposes in that case.
Thank you. Any other comments to be made on this?
Not seeing any further hands raised, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to call the roll?
Yeah, well, yes, please.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
No.
Tim Brady.
No.
Motion passes 4-2, Mr. Chair.
May I make one comment to Director McKiernan? Now that the motion is passed, Dan, I know we've got a spring meeting coming up, and I would like you as Director of DMF and also Vice Chair of ASMSC to let it be known to the policy board that this state or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was the first to stipulate regulations on bonita and albacore, and you would like the other states to follow suit sooner rather than later. Because right now, personally, I just see it being a disfavor to both recreational and commercial harvesters of Massachusetts when no other state has any regulations. So
Yes.
I would hope you do that, Dan, and I will support you, at the policy board meeting.
Yeah, we'll work together on that, right, for sure.
Thank you, Dan. I guess we can move along then, right, Jared?
Sure thing, Mr. Chair.
Restrictions affecting shore-based shark fishing.
I believe I'm back up on this one, so if you'll indulge me for a few moments.
I hope you had
This
a cup
is
of coffee, Jared.
what's that, Raymond?
I hope you had a cup of coffee.
I've had
2
several
today.
This is a refinement on what we brought out to public hearing, and I begin by talking about the consideration we gave to the public comment on this. When developing this proposal, we had it applied to the eastern shoreline of Cape Cod, including all of Monomoy, as well as all of our Gulf of Maine shoreline around the Cape up to the New Hampshire border. We went out with an 8/0 hook size to define what shore-based shark fishing is. An 8/0 hook with an 18-inch leader, fishing from anywhere that's not a vessel. We wanted to prohibit chumming from shore throughout the Commonwealth, and prohibit the deployment of bait by any gear other than rod and reel, or rod and reel other than casting. I'm sorry. We received a lot of a lot of strong and thoughtful public comment on this, and we went out with a very broad public hearing proposal in anticipation that we would receive that to help us refine our proposal, to work backwards from kind of the most restrictive approach we would take. And part of that restrictive approach was really trying to broaden the protections afforded by this for public safety reasons. We are concerned about the growth of kind of social media sharkfish fishing in Massachusetts becoming a hub for that. There is a large contingent of, or a contingent of anglers on social media that kind of are looking for that click and looking for that viral video of them shark fishing, particularly for white sharks. This was recently highlighted last week with a couple gentlemen on North Carolina getting brought into on Fox News with their catch of a white shark on the Outer Banks. And there's a lot of social media clout that can be gotten for this, and we've kind of heard through the grapevine that Massachusetts is the hotbed, or is going to be the hotbed for this activity. And we have a very densely populated shoreline. We have a huge tourist economy in the summer, and frankly, the ability for folks to be trying to lure white sharks up onto the beach, on the Cape, particularly during the time of year where the sharks are here, and this fishing activity is going on, they can't coexist. It's a huge public safety issue. And given that public safety issue, we wanted to take the broadest approach to managing this. But as I said, we received a lot of good public comment on this, and we've really kind of worked backwards to what I think is a much more refined final recommendation on this. And it's refined in several ways. First, we're shrinking the spatial extent of the prohibition on shore-based shark fishing to those waters from Plymouth around the north side of the Cape, down the east side of the Cape, including all of Monomoy. So the spatial extent of that exempts the southern waters of the Cape and the islands, and it exempts the waters north of Plymouth, and really focuses on that area in which white sharks are going to be most commonly found, and that's around Cape Cod Bay in the eastern part of the Cape. It also better, I think, defines shore-based shark fishing to be the use of a metal or wire leader that's greater than 18 inches, and a hook gape that exceeds 5/8 of an inch. Part of our concern about using an 8/0 is that that size is based on a formula of hook length and hook gape, and they're not all standard in size. Just an 8/0 can have a different gape depending on the length and whatnot. So by moving to a hook gape rule that's more enforceable for the environmental police, and also using kind of those parameters of the gear, it may exempt some of the smaller rod and reel gear that's used to target smaller shark species that fall outside of the shore-based shark fishing. So should there be sand tiger fishing or other shark species fishing going on in a place like Barnstable Harbor, or along the Plymouth shoreline, with smaller gear, that wouldn't fall under this prohibition. This prohibition is really targeted at kind of the more robust gear that would be used to target white sharks. Additionally, we've constrained the shore-based chumming prohibition to focus only on shore-based chumming while shark fishing, and also maintaining it only from sunrise to sunset. So if you're trying to chum up on a dock for pollock, or mackerel or you're clear of this. This is really targeted on, people with, shark gear on a beach during the daylight hours of the summertime chumming. And that really kind of, I think, more narrowly addresses the public safety issue there. Lastly, we've, really debated this last point on mechanized deployment of bait. And there was a lot of discussion at this, particularly at the Gloucester public hearing. And we're focused on the deployment of bait. And we also get, let me walk back a little bit. We also get some good public comment, written public comment on, whether our proposal as drafted would, control or limit power trawling, limit pub trawling, and other types of hook and line gear. So we walked it back to be focused on the mechanized deployment of bait that does not include the power or motor source of the vehicle, is limited to rod and reel gear only, and focuses on mechanized or remote control devices. We're talking drones, little remote control boats. It would, not include kind of manual deployment devices such as kites or kayaks. We do want to continue, as proposed at public hearing, to have this apply broadly to all rod and reel fishing, and not just shore-based shark fishing or shark fishing generally, because we can see an application of some of these mechanized devices to target striped bass and other recreational species. And particularly of concern is striped bass. If you can get the bait to target schools of fish further away, then you're increasing the fight time on those fish. And, that's one of the major factors in release mortality at a time when we're really trying to focus on constraining release mortality. So we think that the application of these mechanized remote control devices is more broad than just getting big baits off the shore and past the surf to target white sharks. We think that there's also potentially the use of that in the striped bass fishery could be problematic with release mortality. So that's part of the underlying reason why we're moving that forward in that way. So, I again really appreciate the public comment we received on this. It really helped us refine our proposal into something I think targets our concerns better than the initial public proposal we went out with. So I will take any questions.
Questions on clarity of the recommendation?
Suki?
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification, it says prohibit chumming when shore-based fishing throughout the Commonwealth from sunrise to sunset. I see people in Brown Gloucester chumming mackerel and maybe
I apologize, Suki. That's another typo when putting these together. That should say shore-based shark fishing. Bradley, could you edit that on both this slide and on the following recommendation slide? I appreciate that, Suki. So it would be anyone that's doing that when fishing with a hook with a gape that exceeds 5/8 inch and a wire or metal leader that exceeds 18 inches. So the pollock and mackerel, chumming that you might see along the North Shore, our intent is to exclude that from this prohibition.
Okay.
I should send my slides to you to be my editor. I'm not seeing any other questions, Mr. Chair.
No more questions on clarity, then let's move this.
Bradley, once you make that edit, could you put up the recommended motion slide? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, could you clarify the edit again?
It's on the chumming prohibition. The slide, I believe, says shore-based fishing. That should say shore-based shark fishing. Okay, and on the next slide as well. That would be the recommended motion, I believe. Thank you. Yeah. On number 3 on the recommended motion, shark needs to be put between shore-based and fishing.
Sorry about that.
So can I have a motion here, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Bill, seconded by. Hello.
I'll second it, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley. Got the motion on the board, roll call vote, Jared?
Discussion? Hands for discussion first?
Fine.
Okay, I'm not seeing any. Oh, hold on. Tim Brady?
Tim, you're recognized.
Yeah, I've got a few issues with what the purpose of this motion is. Is this a safety issue for people on the beach? Because we have, each of these communities has their own bylaws about the way that they use their own beaches. And I'm concerned about this limiting access to recreational fishing along our beaches.
So this is primarily an issue to manage what we believe will be a growing user group conflict between folks who are desiring to target white sharks along our beaches and the individuals who other users of that beach. And while we are the agency in the state that manages fishing. And we are looking to use our regulatory authority in that manner to control that conflict.
Okay, I mean, to target white sharks, white sharks are not, in my experience or my knowledge base, chumming with mackerel or chumming with bluefish is not, you're not fishing for white, if that's all you can use, I guess, but I mean, you're really not, what are your chances of attracting a white shark with that type of chum? I don't know. I understand the intent and I understand that, the potential user group conflict, but I mean, are we also preventing somebody who's targeting a different different large shark species, which they can target?
I mean, in terms of the chumming, I mean, yeah, potentially they would be limited to chumming, not during the daytime. If they're using, a wire leader that exceeds 18 inches and a hook whose gape exceeds, 5/8 inches. I would also expect that the environmental police would, be using their discretion when enforcing this, where if they see someone with a fighting harness on and a big pen reel on an outer Cape beach, getting, with a tripod set up to film their activity, among a group of surfers, as opposed to someone using like spinning gear in Barnstable Harbor or, along the south side of the Cape. I think there's a level of discretion I would expect out of them when enforcing this to target it properly.
Yeah, it seems, I don't know, it really seems like, I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, but the ability of someone to catch a white shark from a beach or to target a white shark from an outer Cape beach is really only going to be like in a colony of seals on the outer Cape. I don't see where that would take place. And I'm concerned about other places that are outlined here along the Massachusetts shoreline that would be perfectly fine and legal for someone to target another large shark species.
Appreciate the comments, Tim. Lieutenant Bass?
Yeah, so Tim, yeah, I agree. So frankly, I am somebody that likes to shark fish from the beach. So not white sharks, but, so I was cognizant of, discussing these regs with Jared to, not, prohibit what I like to do as well. So, and as Dan mentioned before in another segment, I think this is a relatively new regulation. We probably, hopefully we'll get it right on the first try. But hopefully we'll be open to amending things if we really got this wrong. But I feel kind of confident. I think we'll just be prohibiting or just focusing on those white shark fishers coming from around the country looking for that viral video.
Thank you.
Ben Gahagan?
Ben, you're recognized.
Thank you, Jared and Ray. I don't want to belabor the point, but just Tim, I think that we did try and spend a lot of time to narrow this down to address your concerns and in both through the spatial extent and what we defined as shark fishing, and also spend a lot of time reflecting on the public comment we got about when and where fishing activity occurred and when people chummed for sharks, which led us to make that a daytime prohibition for shark-based shore fishing chumming rather than a 24-hour restriction, because the comment we received and the discussions we had were that everybody that was chumming for sharks was really at night if they did chum, which was not most people. And then we really tried to define that spatial extent as one where we were reducing the possibility of hooking a white shark, whether on purpose or accidentally, based on where our greatest prevalence of white sharks are in state waters, and also where there's fewer chances of large sharks, based on past experience and the opinion of our shark biologists and outside opinion. So as Officer Bass said, this is something we can refine, but we tried to really constrain down what we brought to public hearing in a way that addressed exactly your comments, and hopefully most of them, upon reflection, that this does a good job of it, and we can always come back and take another bite at this apple. Because as rec fisheries program lead, the last thing I want is to be constraining recreational fishing effort, even if it isn't a large effort, unnecessarily.
Dr. Scomo, did you have something to add?
Dr. Scomo, you're recognized. Congratulations on getting appointed to the Dogfish, I believe it was the PDT.
I think I've been on that a while, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think Ben covered it quite well. But to Tim's point, I mean, actually, I would argue that it's quite easy to target a white shark, particularly along the eastward-facing beaches of Cape Cod. And you don't need to chum. The abundance that we see out there is mind-blowing, and we haven't been able to tag almost 300 if we couldn't find them, and they are quite close to shore. So targeting white sharks anywhere along the red highlighted area is quite easy, and the other species that shore-based shark fishermen typically target do not occur in these red areas. Many of them don't go north of Cape Cod. So the dusky, the sand tiger, the sandbar shark, most of that fishing occurs along the south shore of Cape Cod, in addition to Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard Islands. So very little impact on those existing fisheries. And this gives the environmental police, and Matt and I have been back and forth with this many times, because he has caught people white shark fishing along the outer Cape, but it gives them the teeth they need to be able to enforce this activity.
Thank you, Dr. Scomo. So what PDT did you just get appointed to? I thought I read something about you just getting appointed.
I don't know. I have to look at that email. Maybe spiny dogfish, perhaps?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tim, did you have a follow-up question or comment, or is your hand just not lowered? Okay, no follow-up question or comment there, Mr. Chair.
So then let's, if there's no other discussion on this, shall we move it along?
And we can proceed to a roll call vote. Bill Amara.
Yes.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Chris McGuire.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
No.
Motion passes 5-1, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Moving along to prohibition on retention of oceanic white-tip sharks.
Mr. Chairman, I can take that. It's very simple. It's a complementary measure to match NOAA Fisheries and the interstate plan for zero retention of the species.
Thank you, Dan. So what essentially we're mirroring NOAA's regulation.
Yeah, I like to say complementary because mirror is actually it's the reverse. Left looks right, right looks left. So I like complementary.
Okay, fine. It's just I've heard that word so many times on a commission level under
Yeah.
directions. Thank you.
Joking with you, right?
So we can open this up to clarity on the recommendation. Does anybody need clarity for board members?
Not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair.
Then let's move this along. I need a motion.
Motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Bill. I need a second.
I'll second it, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley. Roll call vote, Jared.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Jared. Moving on, prohibition on the use of lugworms as bait.
Ray,
Yes.
this is same as what we brought to you and we hearing no modifications suggested. It's a potential invasive species. It's recently come to our attention. Maine had heard that some of the bait dealers wanted to carry it and they rejected it based on their more fairly robust regulations concerning the use of baits. And we believe that we should follow suit. This is a species that can look similar to our seaworm, and but this would obviously be enforced against the bait dealers specifically, but as well the users. But we would try to get the control of this by going directly to the bait dealers who are permitted in the Commonwealth under marine fisheries regulations.
Yeah, so I have a question to you, Dan. Would it be smart of us to go to ASMSC and put it before the commission that the use of not invasive species, but foreign species of any sort in any fishery be outlawed on the East Coast? Because I know we had an issue with lobster bait, I believe, a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Ray. We can once we complete this rulemaking, we can carry that forward to the commission at their May meeting.
I would appreciate that, you being director of DMF and also, I'll reiterate, vice chair of ASMF.
Thank you, Ray.
Does anybody need clarity on this?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion, Suki.
Suki, thank you. Seconded by?
I'll second it. Bill Amaru.
Thank you. Bill Amaru.
Discussion, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry.
Just move this for discussion now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any hands raised for discussion, so I will call the roll. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Jared. Moving along to recreational black sea bass season.
Yeah, Ray, you're familiar with this? We do this every year. we modify, when we modify our spring season, we have to take a commensurate cut to our fall season. And when we're required to maintain status quo relative to seasons. And so as a result, one day earlier, which is something very popular with the for hire industry, to allow their clients to retain sea bass on the third Saturday, beginning the third Saturday of May. That costs us 2 days at the end of the year.
Any clarity needed on this recommendation?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Then we could move to a motion on the board and then a discussion if need be. Need a motion.
I'll make the motion, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley. Seconded by,
Chris.
thank you, Chris. Jared, we're gonna open a discussion, and if there's no hands, move it to the roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move to roll call. Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion
The
passes
last-
unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared, and I would like to thank DMF staff for working with the for-hire industry on this over the years. I know we lose a few days in September, but it's critical to get the weekend that Saturday. So I would like to thank DMF staff who has put time into this and has come back with something well received by the public. Thank you. Okay, we'll move along to paperwork requirements for the possession and sale of dogfish fins.
Yeah, so Ray, very simple one. When the legislature and the governor enacted a statute, about 10, 12 years ago to prohibit the sale of shark fins in the Commonwealth, it did exempt the fins from smooth dogfish and spiny dogfish. However, we never followed up on the regulatory side to require dealers or those selling fins to document the source of the fin. And so we think that this is just a little bit of a loophole we need to close. You know, most of these, in fact, my sources tell me that all of the fins that are cut here in the country, if they're going to wind up in eventually as dried shark fins for soups, they wind up being processed overseas, and then they'd have to make their way back. So it's a simple fix to require whoever's selling those fins to be able to document the source of those and the species.
Thank you, Dan. Do we need clarity on Dan or DMS recommendation?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Bill Amaru. Seconded by
I'll second that.
Bill Doyle. Thank you. Open for discussion. Is there any, if no discussion, Jared, no hands go up, go to a roll call vote, please.
Not seeing any hands raised. We'll proceed to roll call. Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair, on the last action item on today's agenda.
Thank you. Well, now we're into final regulatory actions. Commercial eel permitting. Who's got this one, Dan? Hello?
Dan, you taking this?
I think I do.
Okay.
Unless
Thank
Dan,
you,
are
Nicola.
Yeah,
you,
no, I'm sorry, I was muted.
okay.
And just so briefly, Ray, you and I both sit at the Yield Management Board at ASMFC, and one of the issues that the commission has to contend with is the reporting of commercial landings by their commercial fishery, because there are variations of state-by-state quotas that apply. And at this point, we actually don't have a direct quota, but we're considered one of the lowest producing states, and we get a little bit of a pass, but our landings have been kind of amazingly low. And if you look at the trends in this image, it's quite low, almost negligible. However, the permits sales continue to rise, and I'm getting a little frustrated with that, and also a need, in my view, for more integrity in the system. And what we'd like to do is create a control date of last December, last New Year's Eve, and limit permit renewals next year to anyone who's with at least 1 pound of eel landed during the last 10 years. And we think that would just enhance the reporting, or put people on notice, like this is real. Also make the eel endorsement owner operated, like the person who is permitted needs to be the one harvesting. So again, it's there is concern among staff that many of our bait shops have eels in them, and we've never really done an investigation as to whether those eels are being imported from other states, which is perfectly legal. But we want to make sure that the performance of our commercial fishery is verifiable and has the integrity needed for the reporting. Now, mind you, it's possible for anyone to go out and take up to 25 eels and catch them, land them, even store them, in a live well, in their garage or something. So this doesn't necessarily totally constrain the take of eel for purposes of using them as bait, but there is, in my view, kind of a problem where we continue to see higher numbers of permits, and yet the reporting is falling off. So we're trying to get the attention of the participants with this one.
Thank you, Dan. Clarity on Dan's recommendation, DMS recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, so we could take comments or questions. This doesn't require a commission
Okay,
motion and vote.
I'm sorry, I saw it under final regulatory actions.
Yeah, it's a permitting action, so it falls outside the legal discretion of the commission, but we'd still take any comment or consider any comment before moving it forward.
Comments by members.
Bill Amaru?
Bill, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the American eel, these eels that we're talking about, is really one of the most remarkable species that we've had to watch go the way of so many of our resources here on the Cape. I'm particularly close to this fish because in my high school years, I trapped them and I used them for bait for my striped bass fishery. And their abundance was just remarkable at that time in the inland waters of the Nauset Marsh and the Chatham estuaries. They could be taken overnight in eel traps. And now they simply don't, they just don't have, there are no numbers here any longer. I'm sure there's a handful, but I'm glad to see that we're going to be doing something to protect somehow and what remnant population there may be. You never know where you're going to see these things. They can swim up underground through springs from the saltwater ponds up the estuaries and into freshwater ponds where they spend most of their lives until they return to the Sargasso Sea where they spawn and then die. So it would really be neat to someday be able to go drifting along in a flat bottom boat looking over the side and see the eels that we used to see in the shallow waters in the estuaries. I don't think I'll live to see it, but maybe my grandchildren will if we keep addressing the problems that are causing their declines, as in loss of eelgrass beds that was mentioned earlier, and pollution. And those are my comments, and I'm very happy to be able to talk about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Comments from members?
Not seeing any further hands raised, Mr. Chair.
So Dan, as I recall, we've been de minimis for years at ASMFC. And when we've held public hearings or had this subject at in-person meetings on commissioner level, I believe there was maybe, well, one and no more than one commercial harvester.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I know Brad Chase, I know we're in dire straits with eels, and you know, down here where I'm staying right now, the Sagassa weed is unbelievable. They have a season, and the season's gotten longer and longer for it, of it washing ashore. So I hope for the return of eels, but that's all we can do at this point. Bill made comment about that earlier. A lot of our fisheries, but anyways.
So Rick, we'll proceed with rulemaking. As Jared mentioned, you know, we don't need a particular vote from the commission, but if the commission feels that I am kind of off the rails on any of these permitting issues, this is the opportunity to kind of set us straight. So it sounds like we have the support of the commission.
Yeah, my one question, Dan, and I've been concerned about it for years on these different management plans, is this 1 pound. You know, we've done that, you know, in conch, I think it's 5,000 pounds. In this fishery, it's 1 pound. In striped bass, it might be 10 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Ray. So the question is, like, where do you want to draw the line? Because at this is essentially going to deny the renewal of someone's permit, and we'd like to be as accommodating as possible. No, you're not going to find a record with 1 pound, but it shouldn't say 1 pound. It should say with any documented landings. And so I guess that could be one, but the chances of you seeing a number 1 or even a single digit showing up that's not going to happen.
Well, so can we change that wording to any documented landings as opposed to
certainly
1 pound?
Yes. Yep. Jared, you good with that?
No objections.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jared. Any other thoughts on commercial eel permitting from the board members?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Then we can move along.
Okay, I'm going to ask Bob Glenn to help us with this one. It has to do with reporting of entanglements.
Enhanced mariner reporting of sea turtle and large whale entanglements. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'll be very brief here. This is another part of the omnibus package that we put forward in this spring's public hearings. And essentially what this is this relates back to our current pursuit of an incidental take permit. Currently, we do require mariners to report right whale entanglements. However, we do not have anything in the books relative to sea turtles. One of the primary methods by which we depend on our sea turtle disentanglement team are reports from mariners. So we find that there is actually fairly good reporting by the boating community in general. However, in our deliberations with NOAA Fisheries, we made that point that we feel that this reporting is sufficient to detect it and is an important method for us to enhance entanglement efforts. But they had asked if, well, is it required? And I said, well, technically it's not in the books as a regulation. It's one that, we do conduct some outreach on and we do need to enhance outreach on. But from their perspective, they thought, much like our right whale rules, that we should include sea turtles in that. And so essentially this, the rationale here is to expand the existing reporting requirements beyond just entangled right whales to sea turtles and other large whale species. And this, as I said, this really bolsters our incidental take permits efforts gives us an opportunity, as in addition to making a regulation, to conduct an additional outreach with mariners to make sure they understand the importance of it. And essentially, it just helps adopts what is currently is a best practice as a regulation. So with that, I can take any questions. Oh, sorry. One thing I should mention, we did not receive any public comments at the two hearings. However, we did receive one written comment from an individual who expressed concern that this action could enhance could lead to kind of the misidentification of entangled species and may further negatively impact the public standard of commercial pot fishers. And while we certainly understand that sentiment and is always a concern that there's the misidentification, a couple things here to kind of counter that is in this particular case, when an entanglement report is received, the species identification that as reported is not how it essentially is ultimately recorded by NOAA Fisheries relative to looking at takes. They rely on verification by the disentanglement crew or another qualified personnel. So even though someone could call and say, well, I saw a leatherback sea turtle, that doesn't get listed as a leatherback take until a disentanglement team can verify that that's the case. So that there's not really the concern there. And in general, we really encourage folks to disentangle, to report disentanglements, because our efforts are really highly effective. And the damage to trap pot fisheries is much more severe in the events when those animals wash up dead on the beach with gear on it. So we'd prefer to, have the opportunity, enhanced opportunity to be able to disentangle those animals. So that with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Questions for
Suki?
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on a roll, Jared. Bolsters is grammar error, bolsters.
I'm sending these to you before next meeting, so you're on the
Okay.
hook now. Bradley, can you make that correction?
Any other questions?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Not seeing any. So we're coming up.
Oh, Chris McGuire, sorry.
Chris, we're sorry. Chris, you're recognized.
Yeah, not a question, just a comment about outreach. I mean, I think this is a good idea, and it would be great to think about how how to do some outreach around this, so people just know where to call and how to reach out. I think anytime you have a requirement, really puts the onus on the people doing the requiring to make sure people know how to do the thing. So I know that Bob mentioned that, just amplifying that's an important part of this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chris. Any other discussion on this?
Director McKiernan.
Yeah, no, we're good to go if there's no other commission comments, but before we leave this section, I just wanted to state, I may have misspoke in my presentation on the striped bass measurements. I just want to be clear that what was presented on the slide is accurate. And I think I said that it was only going to really affect the recreational fishery, but someone had sent me a message asking for clarification, and obviously the commercial harvesters of striped bass would also be required to squeeze that tail in order to get fish to that 35-inch size, which I imagine they would do anyway. But that which you voted on, which was on the screen, did say recreational and commercial, and I stated that it was only affecting the recreational. I just want to make sure the commission understood that.
Thank you, Dan. Further discussion on entanglement.
Not seeing any comments or questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this to the appetite of commission members. Number 5, there are no new federal fishery management updates, so we're going to punt that to the next meeting. But being how we've got the president of the MLA on the board, I believe we should discuss ASMFC draft lobster addendum 32. Suki, if you have any words on that.
So Mr. Chair, just as a point of order, if we're going to amend the agenda, we do need a motion and a vote on that to punt 5B to the April
Okay.
meeting, if that is the will of the commission.
Well, is it the will of the commission? Is somebody willing to make a motion to punt 5B? We have no updates.
Yes, I'll make the motion.
That's Bill Amrou, seconded by,
I'll second it, Ray.
thank you, Shelley.
I'll call the roll. Bill
Thank
Amaru,
Yes,
Bill Doyle, Bill Doyle, Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Bill Doyle abstaining.
Jared, yes.
Yes, motion passes unanimously with Bill Doyle.
Thank you, Jared. So let's move back to 5A, ASMFC draft lobster addendum 32.
I think we have a slide for that, Ray.
Thank you.
Right, Nicola?
Yes, it's slide 5 in the other slide deck.
I see it.
I'll just cue it up.
It's coming. Yep.
I'll cue it up while we're waiting. There's a, the commission, the ASMFC at their February meeting voted to, enact a new addendum to basically, repeal that which was already enacted in addendum 27 when it came to issues of gauge size changes as well as vent size changes, escape vent changes attributable to the trap. We were going to increase the vent in the year following the 2 gauge increases. You will recall that Massachusetts and you folks already approved our regulations. They were enacted in late December. We talked about this at previous meetings. And so now the next step is to have a virtual hearing in the month of April, and then take final action in May. And so we will be filing, when I say we, DMF will be filing an emergency regulation because we won't have enough time to go through the normal rulemaking process in order to make our Massachusetts fishermen to have the same rules as their New Hampshire and Maine counterparts on July 1st. So we would do an emergency regulation of which means I get to I propose that, with Jared's help, we propose this to the commissioner and then goes all the way up to the governor for their approval. We done on a quote unquote emergency basis. And then within 90 days, we hold, a sort of one of these formality public hearings, and then we come back to within the 90 days and make that a permanent rule. So that's the legal side of this. On the policy side of it, I know Maine is having some industry meetings to devise, what is essentially other ideas for conserving lobsters. But I think we talked in our previous meeting that there is a stock assessment that's going to be released in October. And I think at that point, we're probably going to get some marching orders or none at all, depending on what the outcome of that stock assessment is relative to whether there's overfishing occurring or whether the stock is considered overfished. There have been more substantial declines on a percentage basis in Maine than there was in New Hampshire and Mass. But we've also seen a decline of about, 15 to 18% from the high of 2016. Maine's decline is much more dramatic. It's about twice that amount on a percentage basis. So, we'll see. We spent a lot of time in the last year worrying about what Canada was going to do in the Gulf of Maine. But given the situation with tariffs and the politics between the two countries, it's anyone's guess, how that will wind up. A lot of the reason to renege on these gauge increases had to do with the desire to have Canada adopt some similar, actions, complementary rules, so to speak. And we spent a fair amount of time going up to Canada to talk to them. And I maybe I'm an optimist, but I saw some glimmers of hope, but I wouldn't say that today, given the politics between the two countries. So that's what we can expect for lobster. We'll expect the commission to approve it, expect DMF to enact an emergency reg, expect us to hold a formality public hearing, and then come to you with a kind of a formality vote to repeal those things that on the gauge size changes and the vent size changes that we enacted in our rules.
Thank you, Director McKinnon. Any discussion on this item? Any hands raised, Jared?
Not seeing any, but I'm waiting for Suki's to go up. Suki.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. Thanks, Ray. I've thought about this a lot. I don't think the state of Massachusetts should back addendum 32 because the only pain that's going to be inflicted on any part of the lobster fisheries is on the bunch of guys on the Outer Cape. And I don't think this is a way to try to fix whatever the issues are in the lobster fisheries by directly targeting 35 or 40 guys that fish on the Outer Cape. I'm not saying that I'm in agreement with what goes on out there, but for them to be the target of this whole lobster addendum thing at this point is completely unfair. And representing most of the lobster in Massachusetts, that we're all in favor of maybe some pain has to come to the fisheries, but not just a bunch of guys on the Outer Cape. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Suki. Any other comments?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. So we'll move this along. So have any board members anything to raise for consideration at future meetings?
Sound like we've got one from a member concerning eelgrass.
Yeah, I've got that marked down to reach out to Forrest and Mark about a potential presentation at an upcoming meeting. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, but
Well,
as always, if there's issues to bring up,
I
come
know
up. Oh, sorry, Ray.
Jared Khalil was asking for a June date for the commission meeting. And I'm going to ask well in advance that the August meeting be held on a Tuesday for any of us traveling back to the southeast coast. Thursday can be a hectic day for traffic, no matter where you have the meeting, whether it's in Westboro, Kingston, New Bedford. So can we move the August meeting to a Tuesday?
I can work for that. That's not an issue. And I'll work with Khalil on finding a June date. Though May and April dates are confirmed, as I think are listed below in the agenda with firm dates and locations, but I'll work to get a June date and location and an August Tuesday date and location.
Thank you, Jared.
Suki.
Suki, you're recognized.
Yes, a subject that hadn't come up today, but the issue with marine debris and all, we passed new regulations about how it can be handled around the coast and everything. The whole dumpster issues are falling on the wayside around Massachusetts. The one at Rockport hasn't been replaced. I think there's one sitting in Boston that's been full for a long period of time. I'm maybe talking years. Not sure what's going down in Sandwich, but there's a big push about marine debris. But the whole dumpster part of it, which is one of the most important parts of it, is non-existent. And there's been some gear retrieved in this whale closure, recreational gear, and I'm not sure it was disposed of it. But again, there's no dumpsters for these programs. And maybe, we don't talk about it today, but something that should be brought up in the future. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Suki. Good idea. Jared, let's get that on one of our maybe our next meeting.
Talk to Bob. Well, because Bob and I are going to have to start working on the gear derelict gear removal regs anyway. So that's good to do that in tandem.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Suki, for bringing that up. If there's no other business that members want DMF to address in upcoming meetings, I'm going to move to public comment. Can I move to public comment, or have you got hands raised by commission members, Jared?
I see no further comment from commission members.
Thank you, Jared. Let's move to public comment.
Members of the public, I'd ask that you use the raise hand function. That will create a queue, and I'll work my way through the queue as provide permission to speak. You just have to unmute yourself. Beth Cassoni, you're first.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing my comments today. I'd like to first apologize to Dan McKiernan. I misunderstood your comment regarding the PETA ad. As you can imagine, I'm a little sensitive when I see these ads pop up, and I agree with Suki. If there's anything the state can do to be preemptive, I know you were swift in acting last year. I just think that anytime that this ad is up, it's just going to, infuriate an industry that's doing the most to protect the right whales. So I appreciate the conversation that was had on this, and I'd like to thank Shelley for her information on the ferry ad space being offered to nonprofits. We do have our nonprofit, the Lobster Foundation of Massachusetts, which we will look to possibly find funds to advertise to maybe take up the space before PETA can get there. That's it on that issue. And then I'd like to make mention that the derelict gear removal, Bob Glenn had asked me to find some fishermen, and Bob, I'm still working on that. I have a handful of guys, and I will send their names along to you. And to Suki's comment about the marine debris dumpsters, we've been looking for funds up and down from the state to the federal level. That is really one of our top priorities, because when these marine debris programs come in line and the fishermen are left with the marine debris on their vessels to dispose of it, and they have no place to safely dispose of it, it just becomes hazardous and more frustration. And then I'd like to close with this. I'd like to thank the DMF, Dave, I'm going to probably not pronounce Chosid, and staff that went up to Gloucester for their rope distribution. We really appreciate all the efforts. The industry, is up against the wall with the expenses increasing and, the cost of doing business. And we're going to be having a rope distribution here in short order with the DMF. So I'd just like to say thank you for all your efforts in helping the industry stay compliant.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. Brendan, can you identify yourself and unmute yourself?
How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hey, this is Brendan Adams. I'm the president of Outer Cape Lobstermen Association. And as far as the lobster stuff involving Addendum 27 that goes onwards to Addendum 32, we've commented quite a bit. Some of you have seen our stuff either to the state or ASMFC. And frankly, to be really nice about it, and DMF's done a good job on a lot of stuff. Okay, like, low breaking strength line. You guys are doing a great job on that. But unfortunately, it's very prejudiced and discriminatory about 40 people are going to save the lobster industry due to you guys forcing the V-notch on us, the different V-notch rule. So unfortunately, what's going to happen is we had to lawyer up, and we actually looked back at our old lawsuit where we won against ASMFC and DMF. and some of you might know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you might get up to speed here. So what's going to happen is you guys, the state and ASMFC, kind of defied a federal ruling in court that was on our side in 2000. That's Outer Cape Lobstermen Association versus ASMFC and Mass DMF. So I'm not saying this to be mean, but you're forcing our hand here. And, you know, that's kind of where we're at with this. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, we'd like you to kind of, as you go forward with Addendum 32, to take our V-notch off the table, to put us back to our rule that in 2000 we were allowed. And I'm gonna say something else here that's interesting. So apparently, the Outer Cape lobster state fishery is the youngest per capita fishery in the whole United States. All right. So per person, we're the youngest people, the youngest fishery. And it's because people had faith in what they were buying into, because what our plan did worked. So now you're kind of telling everybody, well, screw you guys, and your plan doesn't work, or we're going to try to change your plan for 5,000 people up in Maine. It's not too cool. So that's kind of where we're at. Just telling you so you know. I've talked to a bunch of you about this before you guys voted on Addendum 27 on the rules in your group here. So that's where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Jared, hands?
Ray J, please identify yourself and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ray Jarvis from Westport, Mass. I'm a fishing guide out of Westport and just wanted to thank the division and the commission for supporting the catch limits and size limits on false albacore and Atlantic bonito. This ensures that I, as a fishing guide, am able to continue in business in the future, essentially. As I had mentioned in the past, these fish account for 30 to 40% of my annual business. And I just wanted to thank you all again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. Jared, hands?
Sam Picard, you're recognized.
Can you hear me?
I can, Sam. Go right ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak. The Vice President of the Outer Cape Lobstermen's Association. And as my President Brendan Adams already stated, there was already a lawsuit 25 years ago. Mr. McKernan is aware of that. He's been around for some time as an observer and then slowly working his way up the ranks. And at all the meetings that we went to for Amendment 27, the Division of Marine Fisheries stated that it was only a 2% loss we're going to have. Now they're saying it's a 12% loss. We say it's a 25% loss of income. But what I want to know is, one, how did we go from a 2% to a 12% number change without a stock assessment? That's one of my points. And the other point, another point I have is, according to the ASMFC, they have to meet with the LCMTs before an amendment has been passed. And after the 2020 stock assessment and before Amendment 27, they never met with at least our LCMT, the Outer Cape Zone. I'm not aware if they met with Area 1 or Area 2 or Area 3, but I know for a fact that they never met with our LCMT, which we would have told them that Amendment 27 is not going to work. We already have a lower trap limit than everybody in Area 1. We've had a proactive management plan. And for some reason, since we're the little guys, we always seem to get picked on. I hate to say it like that, but there's 40 of us left, roughly 40 of us left in state waters. We don't amount for much as far as landings on the East Coast. We don't amount for much for landings in Massachusetts. We have a proven management plan. We went to court 25 years ago and won. Now, unfortunately, we have to do it all again. And at all the meetings for Amendment 27, as well as 32, whether it was on Zoom or the Sons of Liberty Hall in Quincy, not one fisherman stood up and said that we're in favor of these plans. So it's kind of a moot point for public comment, because it just goes to show that the public comments don't seem to go anywhere. I don't know if the state already has their mind up or ASMFC has their mind up, but it's kind of depressing that myself and the other fishermen as a community really don't have much say in the laws that govern us anymore. Thank you for letting me speak today. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go to court.
Thank you, Sam. Jared?
Matt Fast, please unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Jeff Souza, out of Cape Lobsterman, out of Cape Cod. And first, I'll start off with something not lobster related. I guess it would kind of be a question. So with the wintertime flounder possession limit, last year there was the pilot program of the 2 days. Is that still going to be enacted? The price of wintertime flounder is $1.50 versus fluke, which is, $3+ So you go out and get 500 pounds of a flounder, and it's $600-700. So you're barely covering fuel. So that's something that's concerning, because then you got to do more tows to try to get other fish to help make it a profit. And if there's a way to increase the daily limit for wintertime flounder in certain zones or certain times of the year, it might help with bycatch issues trying to catch other fish. So that was my first comment. Second comment is, yep.
Jeff, I'll quickly respond to that. So today, I don't know if you were on, but we did increase the yellowtail limit for Gulf of Maine, Cape Cod to 500 from 350. We're not adjusting winter flounder limits. That requires a interstate action that we do not that we can't do at the moment. But as for the pilot program, I believe our intention is to renew that for the upcoming fishing year, May 1. And I intend to get the information out on that pilot program imminently. I've just been backed up with today's meeting, but that's on the agenda for next week.
All right, just, you fish one area with winter flounder, then you got to steam 12 to 15 miles to go where their good, yellowtail flounder is. And it's not, financially, it's not worth it at price of fuel still over $4 a gallon. So that was just why my question about the 2-day limit.
Yep.
My next comment is about obviously the addendums, and, out of Cape, there's 40 odd of us who are just being discriminated against. If this was a conservation measure, I mean, I'm not a smart person, but the best thing for conservation is do something that's going to have the most effect. And putting the rules on 40 of us versus 6,000 licenses, it makes no sense other than being discriminated against. Price of our licenses, I have more into my license than most Area 1 guys have into their boats. So by putting these rules changes just on out of Cape, you could devalue my license to the point that I am well into it, and now my value's down. I'm upside down on it, and the license in my house is up against my boat loan. So, for conservation, it makes no sense. So I would support, if we're going to do away with all the other stuff in Addendum 27, do away with Addendum 27 altogether. And if you need conservation measures, you've got to start over. I mean, just putting that on 40 odd of us is not going to change what the addendum was set out for. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jeff. Jared?
Anthony Frederick, you're recognized.
Thank you so much for allowing me to comment. Just wanted to offer my appreciation to the state agency for taking on Albies and Bonito. It was a very robust public comment period. To do something like this with the decline of other critical species shows the foresight of the state agency. I'd like to also thank all the commissioners for thinking about this, and no matter which way you voted, appreciate all the thought and earnest comments that were put into it. The people that I represent, my phone is exploding right now. They are extremely happy. They feel a lot more confident in being able to move forward with their businesses. And I work with state agencies from Maine to the Gulf of Mexico, and y'all are really fortunate with Mass DMF. They do an incredible amount of great things. So just offering my thanks and appreciation.
Thank you. Jared?
Mr. Chair, that is all the hands raised among the public. If you want to move to a motion to adjourn.
Okay, as long as the public is done commenting. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, Ray.
Thank you, Shelley, seconded by
Chris?
Chris. Thank you very much. So moved.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared.